Good evening. Before we start tonight's budget meeting, council needs to reconvene in open session. Do we have a motion to reconvene? Moved by Councillor Cadeau, seconded by Councillor Schwint. All those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the Township of Woolwich Special Council meeting on January 27th, 2025. We welcome everyone here today and all those watching on YouTube. I'll start with a roll call of council. I'm Mayor Shantz. I'm chairing this meeting. Councillor Bryant.
Present.
Councillor Burgess.
Present.
Councillor Cadeau.
Present.
Councillor Grant.
Present.
And Councillor Schwint.
Present.
Thank you. The Township of Woolwich acknowledges with deep respect that the land we call home has existed since time immemorial, long before our communities were formed and long before we arrived here. Indigenous peoples have had a deep and lasting relationship with this land, caring for it, learning from it, and living alongside all it sustains. We are grateful to the First Peoples who have lived on and cared for this land and who continue to do so today. In particular, we recognize the Chinatan, also called the Attawandaron, the Anishinaabe, and the Haudenosaunee people. We honor their deep connection to this land and we acknowledge their wisdom, resilience, and leadership. These communities have protected and cared for the land with respect, responsibility, and a sense of shared trust. As we move forward, we hope to build a future based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and stronger relationships with one another. May we continue to learn together to care for each other and to honor all who share this place with us. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. We will start with the Hawkesville Road Servicing Strategy. This is carried over from last week, and I will call on Manager of Development Engineering, Lori Fox. Ms. Fox, you're up.
Thank you very much. Madam Mayor and members of council, so I'm here further to the discussions at last week's council meeting and the deferral of the recommendations. I wanted to provide some further information on staff's recommendation, which is based on development engineering principles to provide a comprehensive, cost-effective servicing strategy that considers development area requirements, downstream constraints, cost to build, and future maintenance obligations and life cycle replacement costs. Next slide. In Report DS 01-2026, staff provided council with 3 options for servicing the expanded Hawkesville Road development area. One was a pumping station, included a pumping station. The other was deep sewers along Hawkesville Road. And the third was servicing through development lands to an existing sanitary sewer on Chris Court. I'm just going to be providing a few details of each of those options based on some feedback we had at last week's meeting and some other correspondence and discussions we've had this week. Next slide. So option 1, that's the one that was for a sanitary pumping station. This could be installed at the south end of the Polocorp lands and could pump sanitary flows from the Hawkesville development area to a sanitary sewer installed along Hawkesville Road. Pros for this option are less disruption for Chris Court residents. There's no doubt it would be less disruptive for them. Cons include the cost of the township for annual pumping station maintenance and life cycle replacement costs, the cost to install the pump station to township standards, which is estimated to be between $5 and $8 million. Next slide. So this slide demonstrates how that would look. So you'll see down in the bottom here, I've indicated that's sort of the area where a pump station could go. It doesn't have to go there, but it could go there. And then up to Hawkesville Road. And the sewer along Hawkesville Road would be installed at a depth to pick up all of the development parcels along Hawkesville Road, including development to the west. Next slide. Option 2 is to install a deep sanitary sewer along Hawkesville Road, which would gravity feed all of the development parcels. And that would gravity feed the parcels on the north side and the south side of Hawkesville Road. The sewer would be in areas that would be about 10 meters deep. The pros for this option are, again, less disruption for the residents of Chris Court. And it would provide a gravity sanitary sewer for all properties, which is our aim. The cons are the timelines to construct a deep sewer and the cost to both construct and maintain this main. Significant disruption would occur on Hawkesville Road and Northside Drive. Next slide. And then this is just another plan that shows what that would sort of look like. And you'll see in red, I'm showing the sanitary sewer that I believe would have to be placed along Hawkesville Road. I'm showing connections to the west development parcels, as did the previous slide, and the connections to both the Polocorp property and to the Schlegel property. To get the sewer depth needed to service the furthest property to the west, I believe they would have to reconstruct this sanitary sewer all the way down to about this location here, close to EB Street. Next slide. So, sorry. So the third option, that is, we're calling that the Chris Court option, okay? And this option connects through the Polocorp property, so all of the properties along Hawkesville Road would connect through a sanitary sewer that runs through the Polocorp property and outlets at an existing sanitary servicing connection at Chris Court. This option would allow shallower connections on Hawkesville Road and could include an easement through the Polocorp lands to ensure all development lands could be connected to the servicing strategy area. The pros of this option are less disruptive for Hawkesville Road and Northside Drive residents, shallower gravity-fed sewers that are cheaper to maintain and cheaper to replace, and a much shortened installation timeline for the areas outside the development. Cons are short-term disruption to the Chris Court residents and the replacement or renovation of the home on Chris Court. And next slide, please. So this slide is of the property on Chris Court. What you'll notice is that it shows an easement that's approximately 7 meters wide, that easement, that location. The final width of it would have to be determined based on engineering for the development properties. And it shows an approximate location of a sanitary pipe that could come through that easement and connect. You can see that that connects in the west to the Polocorp property, and then it would go out to the east to connect to the existing sanitary sewer on Chris Court. This shows the house that's on there now. You can see inside that easement area that's shown there. The pool is now, and a portion of the house. I think the house, it would be up to the owner. They could either renovate that house and remove the portion that's within the easement, or obviously they could rebuild on that lot as well, as there seems to be lots of area. I did a quick calculation. It seems like there could be about a 40-foot wide house placed on that lot. And this sketch here, this shows sort of the layout for what would happen with an option 3. So You'll notice that the dashed line there, that is the easement location line. And it comes up. It could snake through that development however the developer wanted to through their road allowances. And then where it connects to Northside Drive, there would be a connection going to the north side to the Schlegel property and as well to the west to pick up those existing two development properties to the west are eligible that are inside of the development boundary. You'll notice that there's nothing that's changed on this section of the road here because these properties are all connected to that existing sanitary and they could remain connected to that existing sanitary. Next slide, please. So all details for the final location and sizes would be decided through detailed development design provided by the property owners. Water mains along Hawkesville Road would be reviewed for capacity and modified if needed accordingly. So there is that, I'm going to say, I'll use the term probability that the water main along Hawkesville Road that's there now doesn't sufficiently service the development properties, but the final determination for that can be made at the time when the development applications are brought in. And all, as noted in the report, all costs associated with the installation of an area servicing strategy would be borne by the developers. Next slide. So in summary, this is just a little bit of a summary that talks about the three options. Option 1 being the pump station, option 2 being the deeper sewer, and option 3 being Chris Court. And what I did was I looked at approximate construction costs and life cycle replacement costs, and I based that on the costs doubling in about 20 years, but that's approximate, okay? Disruption to the neighboring area. So obviously the pump station, they still would need to install the sanitary sewer on Hawkesville Road. So that's going to have about a 6-month construction time to do that. The deep sewer, again, I think 6 months, talking about 6 months on that is sort of generous. I could see that taking longer than that. Whereas the Chris Court option, it really is a short amount of time that it would take, about six weeks and possibly less than that, really. And I want to note that the Chris Court option does not include the property purchase in those estimates. And I kind of did that because there would be the opportunity for the purchaser to resell or rebuild that lot. So that I didn't include that in there. Next slide. So in closing, staff have reviewed the servicing options with the region, our peer review consultants, along with developers and their consultants, based on our principles to provide a comprehensive, cost-effective servicing strategy that considers development area requirements, downstream constraints, cost to build, and future maintenance obligations and life cycle replacement costs. It is development engineering's opinion that option 3 is our preferred option. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Councillor Schwint.
Thanks. Had a lot of questions on this and conversations. If you go back to option 1, just give me some clarity. Maybe could that slide come back up?
It's going to be,
I'm a little bit confused on
Sure.
depths.
should be, let me
Option
just
one.
tell you that. Yeah, give me 1 second here. That should be slide 3, yeah. There it is.
Okay,
That's the pump station option.
yes, yep. So the lands to the west are showing being serviced through this. Is this gravity fed down to the pump station and pumped back up to the, I'm gonna call it the main along Hawkesville? Road, or is it gravity fed from those two properties into the main?
So through the mayor to the councillor, this scenario here is based on them being gravity fed to that main, not to the pump station.
Okay,
So the properties to the west, the main would stretch along Hawkesville Road all the way from Northside Drive, all the way out at a depth that could gravity feed those two west properties. And then the pump station would pump up to that elevation.
okay, and how deep is that compared to what's existing now?
That main would run anywhere between at the closest or the least depth elevation, about 3 meters below grade. And but there are some areas just because of the road grade that it would be 5.5 meters estimated deep as well.
Okay,
Councillor Cadell.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Ms. Fox. I'm wondering, and forgive me if we went over this last week. I think I remember the question. I don't know if we got an answer though, so I just wanted to ask it again. The size of the existing sewer intake pipe that these will connect to if it goes with option 3 down Chris Court. Do we know the size of that and whether or not it would be able to accommodate both developments?
Through the mayor to the councillor. Yes, we do know the size of that pipe. It's a 200 millimeter. It's a concrete pipe. It's older because it was built with this subdivision, but it's a 200 millimeter pipe. Sanitary sewer sizing, 200 millimeters is the minimum. This development that is flowing into that pipe, these houses on Chris Court obviously didn't likely require a pipe that size. However, that is the minimum size that through standard engineering practices that we would install. So when we look at other developments in the area, 200 millimeter pipe can handle quite a few houses, quite a few development houses. All of that would be analyzed with the developments, with their staging and with the numbers of units that they're proposing for each one. And it would be up to the developers to prove to us that that downstream system can accommodate it. They can't send more to that than it can accommodate.
Jared.
Yeah, just from a former life doing design, 200 mil pipe at a 0.5% minimum slope, roughly 1,500, 1,600 people, depending on range area. But for perspective, and I believe you might be in the neighborhood of around 800 potential people here. So more than enough capacity with that size of pipe.
So if we were going ahead and designing something from scratch right now, we'd probably go with 200 milliliter. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Grant.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, is there any planned road work on Hawkesville Road, like for the water main? Do we know a timeline of when that road may be ripped up for additional work?
Through the mayor to the councillor, I'm actually going to allow, or not allow, but let Jared speak a little bit on this because he has some history on that. But it's my understanding Hawkesville Road was rebuilt fairly recently, and I don't think we know of any future work that the region has planned for Hawkesville Road being a regional road.
Okay.
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Grant. Maybe the residents could correct me on the year, but I believe we're in around 2020 when Hawkesville Road was reconstructed by the region, and that would include the piece on Sawmill, kind of that little stretch on the north side, and then down to the train tracks there. So no plans to do any reconstruction there. Northside Drive, there would be no reconstruction plans either from the township's perspective on the piece that we own. Yeah, it would just be more pavement rehabilitation, no underground work that we would contemplate.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz. Sorry if this was already said in an earlier slide, but for this option here, how does the cost sharing work between the developers? Like how much would the north side development be on the hook for doing this part? Because they would be redoing the pipe from north side right up to Hawkesville, all the way along there.
Sure. So through the mayor to the councillor. So the development partners, I'll call them development partners because they have been development partners through this process we're in. They would be providing these services to be installed. That would be borne at their cost. The cost sharing part of that is not something that the township would become involved with. That would be something that between the developers, they would come up with what they feel is fair for the sharing of all of the costs. For all three of the options, that would be the case.
Ms. Freeze?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that to say that if one developer goes ahead of all the rest of the development, then they would have to upfront that cost. The township would not be upfronting the cost for the development.
So just to understand process, if neither developer had come forward and we were just planning for some future development and then they came forward, how would the cost sharing happen then?
So whoever came first would have to pay for the full cost. We would put a servicing plan in place and their plans would have to align with that servicing plan. And if there was only one developer that came forward, they would have to upfront the cost. And then they could recoup some of those costs through best efforts clauses as additional developments came on.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, I'm not seeing any, so thank you. We'll go ahead with delegations. And first, I have a little blurb I get to read to you. I have some instructions for our delegations this evening. Please keep to the time limit posted on the agenda. There will be a timer on the screen and you will hear a warning sound when you have 1 minute left and again when your time is up. Once you are finished, council may ask some questions of clarification for you. This is not a time for a back and forth discussion with council, but for council to clarify your comments. After that, you can return to your seat. All are welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting or leave when you wish. Once all delegations on the agenda have spoken, council will begin their discussion and debate. So first we have David Baker representing the residents of Chris Court. Mr. Baker, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Shantz, council members and staff. My name is David Baker. I'm a resident of Chris Court and my neighbors have asked me to present on behalf of the court. This evening, I'm going to speak to viability, reasonableness, including long-term costs to the township of using Chris Court sanitary connection versus building a new pump house to connect the sewer main on Hawkesville Road. In a perfect world, where all things are equal, there's no question that a gravity sanitary system is simpler and easier to operate. However, this isn't a perfect world and things are not equal. The preference for a gravity system equally relies on assumptions and/or mitigations to manage the increased risk associated with this plan. Namely, groundwater, based, and this is in quotes, based on the GE groundwater level measurements, the high groundwater levels range from existing ground elevation at MW 24.5 to approximately 3 meters below existing ground level at 2402. This means a significant amount, if not all of the proposed sewer for the Chris Court option will be constructed below the high level water table, necessitating extra measures such as cutoff collars and trench plugs to stop groundwater from flowing into Chris Court. And that's the source from the GE Consultants Functional Servicing Report of December 25. Depth of the excavation. The Chris Court connection is over 5 meters deep in the court, and the Polocorp lands are higher than Chris Court, necessitating deep excavation for gravity to work, in some places in excess of 7 meters. So in addition to the added risk and cost associated with construction, this infrastructure will rest below the water table, increasing the risk of infiltration and potentially exacerbating a known problem within the community sewer and storm management system. 3, destruction of property. The Chris Court solution is obviously invasive to the existing community, necessitating the complete or partial destruction of an existing home and additional easements. Maintenance and servicing. We have been assured that the existing sewers at Chris Court are sound and have another 50 years of life or longer if lined. However, this is yet another assumption this option relies upon. And if a major failure occurs, invasive and potential further property damage is a possible outcome. It is also noteworthy that the GM Blue/GE evaluation of the servicing strategy, the gravity system garnered an X while the pump house solution received a check. Specifically, the pump house option won out over Chris Court when considering that the servicing strategy is cost-effective from both an initial capital cost perspective and a long-term operation and maintenance perspective, end of quote. Which brings us to cost. In the January 20 meeting, Mr. Brenneman explained that you, staff and council, have a responsibility to not just Chris Court constituents, but all residents. So presumably, cost is the driving factor because ultimately servicing, repair, and maintenance are all a function of cost. He went on to note that a pump house solution bears more cost because of the added maintenance and servicing required. And now this is, I don't have the benefit of being an engineer or access, so I relied on an AI engine to access notes. So my numbers, and in talking with the developers, my numbers vary dramatically from the numbers that you shared on cost to build and service a pump house. But I'll continue with my notes with that. And so while it is true in some circumstances, it's not true here because the previously mentioned realities, taking the upfront and ongoing costs into consideration and projecting over a 50-year lifespan, it's at least double the cost on a net present value basis using a 3% discount rate. I completed a rough model using available data in the region of Waterloo standards and metrics and an AI engine. This is particularly the case when factoring in technological improvements that are certain to emerge in favor of a pump house solution. But even if that was the same cost, isn't that solution far and away a better option? By using the additional funds needed to make the Chris Court option viable, the township could levy a development charge to seed a fund for an operating and maintenance budget to ensure the cost benefit to the township. In summary, rationale for a pump house that eliminates the need for a deep, high-risk excavation and costly property acquisition, has a lower total net present value and shorter construction schedule, improved resilience and adaptability, avoids dependence on an aging 50-year-old gravity infrastructure, minimized community disruption and environmental footprint. The secondary option, the gravity system, is technically feasible, but high risk, high cost, and environmentally disruptive given its site constraints and required depths. Closing, it's not just me and the residents of Chris Court who've come to this conclusion. It's both developers and engineering firms, GE Consulting and WalterFedy, who have come to similar conclusions. The preferred solution by staff is not without risks and carries no certainty of a cost advantage. In fact, a reasonable argument suggests the opposite. None of us are sure why this is the preferred solution aside from references to cost. We've had more illumination on that here, but again, not privy to the exact numbers that went into to that formulating of the $6 to $8 million cost. In another time, we might have taken this up with OMB, but as this responsibility has now fallen on you, I urge you to act with prudence. Thank you.
Are there questions for Mr. Baker? Councillor Schwint.
Thanks. I appreciate a lot of people doing a lot of work on this, and I'm wrestling with concerns about ongoing maintenance. How will they be different with aging infrastructure, with or without the new development feeding into the Chris Court main? If that pipe goes, the odds of it going are the same, whether or not that extra subdivision feeds into it. And either way, we've got to fix it. Or is there something I'm missing here?
No, I'm just assuming that the added strain, the flows, the disruption, you've got soil distribution as you're tapping into it. They're all factors that could weigh into an earlier repair than not.
Anyone else? Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to the delegate. I just wanted to clarify one thing related to cost. When we're talking about cost, you're mentioning it's the responsibility of us as council to take into account all of the residents of Woolwich. Now, developers are going to be paying for the initial infrastructure, and then it'll be the township that will take that over and maintain it. And so my position is to hear what's going to be the cheapest for the township to maintain over the long term. That infrastructure that gets built originally It's not going to be on the township's dime. And so I just wanted to be clear on that when you're speaking about the costs. So I guess it's more of a comment, not a question, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thanks. Next is Mike Puopolo of Polocorp. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Council, for the opportunity to speak. Over the past week, we've had constructive discussions with staff, Schlegel, and local residents to better understand their concerns. We respect those concerns and are committed to working collaboratively to address them. From our perspective, a comprehensive servicing solution is an essential first step. Realistically, there are two viable options: a public pumping station or the Chris Court gravity option. Regarding this option, I would like to like to thank Councillor Schwind and staff for proposing a reduced easement. This will go a long way for preserving the house, the character of the neighborhood, as well as assisting our cost sharing discussions. Having a clear servicing framework first is important because it informs our planning applications and any cost sharing discussions we have thereafter. Cost sharing is complex when multiple landowners benefit, but this isn't something that happens overnight. We have time to structure a fair and balanced agreement, and both Schlegel and I have done several cost sharing agreements in the past. We understand that a concern has been raised regarding potential access for servicing should our development not proceed within a particular time frame. We are prepared to consider granting of an easement over our lands that will permit a third party to advance servicing. But a cost sharing agreement would need to be in place to ensure the proportional cost recovery or a servicing levy as indicated in your previous report. But rest assured, we will be proceeding in due course. Once a single servicing strategy is endorsed, Polocorp will move forward with a draft plan of subdivision at a reduced density compared to our earlier condominium concept, which is what we heard last May at our public information meeting. To provide certainty that to Schlegel and other stakeholders, we request a commitment that subsequent applications be processed expeditiously, that the appropriate public information meeting occurs in short order in order to avoid unnecessary delays and provide transparency to all. We will continue engaging with residents and stakeholders. Our support is for a single, comprehensive solution that is least disruptive to the community, supports future growth, and manages costs responsibly. Finally, on the region water capacity issue that was raised last week, the region is working closely with the development industry and lower tier municipalities. But based on a regional staff report, I believe it was released today, the timelines for servicing the site, we're confident meaningful progress will be made before the project reaches its building permit stage. My brother, Joseph Cosio, could speak to this matter as he's been working with the region on this issue, if you so choose. Thank you. I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there questions? Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor, through you to the delegate. Thank you for bringing up last May. It's welcoming to hear that the density is going to be lowered. During that presentation, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you had also presented a portion of your development to be a condo. And so if it had have been a condo, would that make this pumping station private, or would that still be public if it had remained a condo? And second, what was the decision to switch from the condo back to just more public subdivision?
So through the chair to Councillor Cadeau. Yes, if we would have been in a private pumping station. Through discussions with staff, they've indicated that they do not want a public station be private or public because of the potential liability of maintaining a pumping station.
Anyone else? Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have Matt Ninomiya of WalterFedy representing Schlegel Urban Developments. Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm a professional engineer and I'm the land development manager with WalterFedy and speaking in my capacity as lead engineer for Schlegel. I'm also current president and chair with the Waterloo Region Home Builders Association and past president with the Brantford Home Builders Association. I've been practicing civil engineering in the region of Waterloo for over 20 years and within Woolwich for the majority of that time. I'm also a former resident of Woolwich and I have a deep working knowledge of local and industry standards. I've been involved in subdivisions within the township, of which one has included municipal sanitary pump station that is still operational. This is the Country Club Estates subdivision here in Elmira, also known as the Lunor Group lands. So option 3, servicing via Chris Court, is the recommended option as presented by staff. However, my professional engineering opinion is that further review and evaluation of options is required in order to arrive at a well-designed mechanism to ensure that a comprehensive servicing of all lands can be implemented. Based on discussions that have taken place to date, my professional engineering opinion that sufficient detailed review of the servicing options has not taken place. Staff have advised that evaluation is based on minimizing sewer depth, cost, and disturbance. Based on lengthy discussions with staff as recent as yesterday, detailed review has not been completed. Given the magnitude of potential impacts, it's prudent that sufficient detailed review be completed to understand and support the various options. Details relating to feasibility, depth of sewers, timing, cost, and service area be taken into consideration. There's a graphic on the screen which I can circle back with if there's any questions. But for example, in the presentation provided for option 3, as presented on the screen here, it notes that the sewer would be 3 to 4 meters deep. And this is incorrect. Based on the current plans by Polocorp and trying to keep sewers as flat as possible to maximize the gravity catchment area, which is the intent of this exercise, sewers are approximately 7 meters deep or more in multiple locations through the Polocorp lands. This is deeper than the 5-meter deep sewers as presented in option 1 for Hawkesville Road sewers. Further, in order to facilitate the recommended option 3, the township is indicating that it is prepared to relax design standards, specifically easement width and sewer depth. So there's another slide that you can refer to for illustrative purposes. Staff had advised that the easement width on lot 9 Chris Court is to be no more than 7 meters in width, whereas the design standards require width approaching 15 meters. I have not been involved in a project where the easement width for servicing has been reduced by more than half the required width as proposed by staff. If the standard easement width is utilized, there may be limitations to the use of the land by the time side yard setbacks are taken into consideration. As a professional engineer, I'm not opposed to having flexibility with design standards. However, the application of flexibility in the design standards by staff is very inconsistent. There's another option with sewers that are less than 7 meters and do not require disturbance of Chris Court. Now, I also want to reiterate that it's important to note that regardless of the selected options, Hawkesville Road does need to be disturbed to upsize the water main to facilitate development. As it currently stands, water pressures are low based on the information provided by the region. Further to what I've noted, it is unclear when the lands proposed for the option 3 through Polocorp are to be conveyed to the township. It has been expressed by delegations in the past that there have been concerns over soil quality. We need to ensure that remediation and preparation of the lands takes place prior to conveyance to the township. Simply conveying an easement without any potential remedial work is premature. It is also unclear whether timing It is also unclear whether the timing as well as costs associated with this have been taken into consideration with the evaluation of this option. Has this impact been reviewed as part of the evaluation of the options presented? If so, what assumptions have been made? Their impacts to both timing, cost, and process. In 2025, we came together as engineers for Schlegel and Polocorp to review 3 options at that time. We heard the direction from staff that we cannot deviate from township standards and that we were further being held to standards not captured within any document, specifically with regard to retaining wall, grading, and the use of sanitary pump station. With that direction and in good faith, we came up with a new option based on the criteria provided, which has brought us to where we are currently. The new option aligns our street with Polocorp, has looked for ways to create connectivity with the church property east of us, and has looked for solutions without increasing sewer depth on Hawkesville Road. We're not saying Chris Court cannot be an option for those lands with lower grades, but in my professional engineering experience, comprehensive servicing is routinely achieved through a combination of servicing solutions. I would like to take a moment to clarify the new memo issued today in regards to the storm servicing. It notes that the preliminary discussions with the region identified that the continued use of the rail corridor to drain development stormwater may not be an option. This is taken out of context. The meeting in question with the region of Waterloo was specifically around the use of storm sewer as an outlet for groundwater. The region advised that they were opposed to outletting of additional flows from the Schlegel lands from a purpose-built third pipe groundwater conveyance system. About 20% of the Schlegel lands, as well as the adjacent lands at 56 and 60 Hawkesville, drain to the Hawkesville Road today. There's a riparian right for this legal outlet. The legal outlet for lands fronting Hawkesville cannot be arbitrarily removed. The majority of the Schlegel lands drained north to the woodlot and sensitive wetland to the north, and that's a separate part of design which we have accommodated. I would also like to provide comment on the presentation today. Costs presented in the slides have not been shared with us previously. When Polocorp and Schlegel and the engineers met earlier in 2025, costs were prepared by the engineers at GI as well as WalterFedy based on industry costs, and those costs were shared with the township. The costs for option 1 are significantly higher now than what was previously provided. So comparatively, 3 million versus the 5 to 8. With that said, on the summary slide at the end, I think now it's shown as 8 to 10. So I'm got some questions on that. And then also in option 2, costs have gone from 6 million to 10 million. And now they're at 10 to 12 million. So unclear there. And the cost for option 3, while they're presented on that last slide, it feels like a lot of the costs are inflated. So my professional engineering opinion is that the current recommendation is incomplete and prejudices the development of the Schlegel lands, and further review of the options and combination of options need to be reviewed in detail. It's premature to say that there is only one engineering option at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there questions? Councillor Burgess.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to the delegate. So summarizing what you're saying, it looks like you're implying we're jumping the gun and haven't done our due diligence and analysis and all that. From you or your client's opinion, do you have an alternate you are looking at or proposing that you could share a bit more details on?
I think there's a combination of options that can be reviewed, but I think without fully understanding, again, from the timing and process perspective, I mean, with, for example, if we're looking at option 3, if Schlegel were to advance getting access to the land to construct the sewers, what does that process look like? Are the lands going to be free and clear of any potential issues? We still don't know. So how does that process look like? Is that in our control? Is it not in our control? Whose cost is it? These are a lot of details that still need to be worked out, that we have uncertainty at this point. So I think further due diligence to really flush out those details is needed at this time.
From the analysis you've done, does there look like there's an option for the development on the north side to tie straight into Hawkesville Road and the existing services there? Yeah, so if we were to look at just the Schlegel lands, yes, we can extend the existing sewer on Hawkesville where it stands today without deepening it. It would mean that the sewers would have to get extended to our site. It won't be at that 2.8 meter depth. With that said, that 2.8 meter depth is based on having residential units fronting the road there. So, and that 2.8 meters is basically so that basements can drain by gravity. But with our proposed plan, we have a stormwater management pond right at the entrance. So there are no residential units anywhere close to that. So within the site, no issues getting the required depth. And I think it's just a matter of achieving frost cover over the sewers, and we achieve that. I think we're at that 1.5 meter mark. You need 1.2 meters for frost cover, so we can achieve that by going by gravity.
Councillor Schwint.
Sorry, but I need to follow up on Councillor Burgess's point of view because I'm hearing two drastically different opinions on this. One opinion is you can tie in current sewer depth on Hawkesville Road with a lot less interruption to the community and cost. And I'm hearing another opinion where no, we have to deepen that significantly at great costs. And to me, we as council, we're trying to decide which opinion's right. And I would like to think that a group of engineers could, I guess, come to an agreement on this. So can I?
So yeah, I can maybe provide some clarity. So if we're looking at, I think it really comes down to how many of the non-participating landowners are we trying to accommodate at this time? That's really what it comes down to. So if we're trying to accommodate 56 and 60 Hawkesville, so the westernmost lots on the north side, If we're trying to accommodate those via gravity, we would have to deepen the sewer all the way from north side, all the way across. And we can just get to their eastern property line and make that work before you run out of cover. If we're not accommodating the future development of those lands and just accommodating the Schlegel lands, then we can get there by gravity. And then if we're looking at Polocorp, trying to get them in by gravity, they're either going in by Chris Court or have to utilize a pump station, whether public or private. Those are options that are on the table. And it is not uncommon to have private pump stations. Those are very common.
Okay. Councillor Grant, I saw your hand up. Did you have a question?
No, that the delegate just answered for me.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Deborah Martin. Ms. Martin, welcome.
Thank you for allowing me to be here. Yeah, quite a bit of information tonight. Now, I have concerns on the construction. Like I noticed your graph there where it's like 6 months, 6 months, 6 weeks, okay? When the region did our road in 2020, then, 8 weeks, and it ended up being 4 or 5 months. And we were detoured onto Old King Street, which is Township Road. And it was so bad with bumps, like it literally ripped my exhaust off. I put higher profile tires on my car just so that I wouldn't bottom out. And it's like, are we gonna go through all this again? Like with the construction, and who's doing it? Is Steeden Evans doing it? Like, I don't know these things on, is it up to Polocorp and Schlegel's to bring in crews to do this? Or is the region involved in it? Because they're the ones that already did the road in 2020. They cut my phone lines twice, even though they knew where they were. They almost cut our water line from across the road. And then they complained to us that our water line that was put in 1945 was not in the right place on the engineer plans, because that's where they wanted to put one of the catch basins. So they had to move the catch basin. But I just, like, when do I find out this kind of information? Like, how is it going to affect us personally? How is it going to affect the people on Chris Court personally? Who's going to be in charge? Because I remember when they did the water line on Chris Court in 2020 also, and they had covered it in, did the road back in, and next thing you know, bang, they're digging it back up because they screwed something up and it was leaking up through the road. Like, I just have so many questions, and I'd like to know when we're going to be able to plan our lives around all this controversy. And I'm a little disappointed because I heard that over the next 3 years, our property taxes are going to go up 50%. But then when you read about these new subdivisions that bring down property taxes, well, if we've got 1,500 people moving into St. Jacobs, which is 3/4 of the population of St. Jacobs, and that includes farmers, then our property taxes should really come down a lot, which it won't. But I mean, I just have basic concerns, which we never get answers to. And it's frustrating. I'm sorry.
I understand uncertainty is very frustrating, and right now there's a lot of it because we haven't made a decision on where we're going and what we're doing, so we can't really answer the questions, but
isn't that a little off balance? Like, yous are figuring out the sewer and the water and everything, but yous haven't even passed any of the plans that Polocorp and Schlegel's has given for the housing units and everything. Like, how do you know what your needs are for water and sewer if you don't know what's actually going into those two subdivisions? Because it's not law. You do not have to have high density building. You can turn around and do 2-acre lots and you can put on single family homes. It's not law. I checked it out. I actually submitted in October 15 pages. I brought it up here with all the different laws and everything. I've done my research. Like, I'm not impressed with having a 3-story high whatever beside my house, blocking my sunlight, blocking my privacy and everything else. So I will continue to fight this to get my point across.
Okay,
But thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time.
questions? Okay,
What do you do?
Ann Bauman?
You get no answers.
Thank you. I'm just coming with concerns about the whole North End development. I spoke about it last summer, still continuing to address traffic calming. That's essential for our community's safety. So I've been pondering it, and I'm trying to come up with stuff that's not so costly that we don't get our taxes boost up more. One is the intersection of King and Sawmill has experienced many near-miss incidents and actual fender bender. My husband and I were almost hit by a snowplow at that corner that was busy looking at something down there while he was driving and came through the stop sign, and we missed his blade. We need four stop signs at the top of King and Sawmill for traffic calming. In the future, when all this housing comes, you may need to look at the price of lights, but I think a red stop sign is a pretty cheap alternative. I'm trying to come in at this with budget solutions to keep our community that has to grow safe. Or you say has to grow. I have some solution for that to suggest. The King and the North Side and Sawmill intersection is a 3-way stop, and there people do not stop at that stop sign, they just turn and go. And so there's many times that's a real close call. A 3-way stop there would also do traffic calming and is not an expensive alternative as we bring in more construction possibly, but also just more people into the area. I spoke to Eric Schwint on the 23rd of January, and I highlighted the need for sidewalks on Northside Drive due to the increased traffic that will come from the Schlegel development. However, I pondered it as I was walking my dog up the street, and a more cost-effective solution is to install speed bumps from Northside, the corner of Sawmill, to the beginning of the Schlegel development. None from the Schlegel development to King Street. That would keep people from wanting to go over speed bumps down to Sawmill, and they would be more inclined to go up and use King Street, the regional road. And it's a cheap alternative without sidewalks for a while till we figure out what we're doing with sewers and traffic and stuff. And in the meantime, keeping communities safe. To further mitigate our traffic issues, it's imperative, and I'll say it again, to provide temporary road access at the cost of the developers into the construction sites from Hawkesville Road, because there is no other place that you can't have it coming off a busy, off a really housing residential street is what I'm trying to say. Creating a separate construction road that can be just a gravel road from Hawkesville Road into the developments is an essential step. The other thing that all of us here in this back row that are residents would say and just to bring it out again, any levies or taxes related to any of the installation of new sewage, drainage systems, anything, must be solely assigned to developers and future developers. And I say that there's properties along there that we kick the bucket and we have to sell our house. That house might be bought by a developer, but it might be bought by just an individual family that wants a 2-acre or 1-acre lot. They don't get a levy put on because of the sewage, only if they're a developer and they make it more high density, then they can pay into it if they want, the developer. But not if I'm selling my house and, oh, well, now you're no longer the resident, there's a levy on your house. I felt a bit of what I wanted to say at this happening tonight when the engineer spoke. I'm bad with names when I'm standing in front of people. I'm just really saying that while development in the area is understood to be inevitable, it's important to proceed with caution. The last council meeting, the phrase, "I think," was used more than several times in response to questions about sewage, indicating uncertainty. Decisions must be based on secure and reliable information and not speculation. Having a third-party review may be what's strongly suggested to prevent unforeseen future issues. It needs to be transparent, with complete transparency between all and confidence between engineering, sewage, top water, drainage, and the township to keep the community served well in the long term. We talked about they've taken down some of the planned density at Polocorp. I talked to you guys to maybe going 2 areas to do strategic reallocation of this high density development. One is consideration should strongly be given to placing your high density development near Crossroads in Elmira, within that Schlegel development and others, because Elmira already offers more stores, restaurants, all the things that are in place already for density. Even a proposed bypass is already there by Elmira being proposed to fit with more density. So as you fight with, I'll call it, our Ontario government telling you you need to have more people, more density in Woolwich Township, well, that may be, but think carefully. They might fit in that Elmira corner better. And additionally, there's land near Rim with existing infrastructure. There's acres of land down there not developed where you can push to have developers develop more density there. Last but not least, there's a thought of putting I have this thought of putting a sidewalk or not a sidewalk, just a trail that goes around the edge of the Schlegel development along the railroad track and along the Polocorp one that has the ability for all these people you're bringing in to have some place for their mental health to go for a walk. And the maintenance can be done by community volunteers. I'll even go cut some branches down to make it happen. And I talked about it before. The sidewalk going from Eby to King Street is new and wide and maintained, but there are no lights along this sidewalk, and we have more people coming. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Ms. Bauman? Councillor, can you come back up? We do have questions for you.
I should refer this question to staff, I think, because we get confused a little bit. We're dealing with servicing tonight, I know, and not to plan a subdivision and the associated issues, but could staff maybe let us know at what point does the traffic study and traffic changes happen when subdivisions or plans of condo occur? When do we start looking at lights and four-way stops? Is it after the houses are built where it's almost too late, or is it during construction? What's the process?
Ms.
Does it
Fraser?
even have to be with construction? That's my question. I've nearly been hit twice at the corner of Sawmill walking with my dog with a safety vest. The same thing at the top of King. I've got neighbors that have been creamed at that corner, and I don't know. I don't know how long we have to wait to just put a four-way stop. I don't know that that's even just the development, but the development certainly pushes it.
So there's a few questions here. I'll go to Councillor Schwentz and ask either Lori or Deanne if you can talk, because there were a couple questions in there about process. Can you talk about process for people because they're not necessarily familiar with it?
Sure, to the mayor. So part of the development process, review and development applications, is to develop, is to take a look at traffic. It's correct, and traffic being cars and also pedestrian traffic. So that is all reviewed as part of the development review. When we review all of the development documentations, a detailed traffic impact study needs to be done. And any impacts to the neighborhood need to be mitigated through, it could be adjustments to traffic signs. It could mean the implementation of traffic lights, and it could be in implementing pedestrian crossovers and things like that. So for the new development areas, that's done as part of that development approvals. At times, the installation of those devices happens before houses are built. And at other times it happens after. It just really depends on the complexity of the traffic issue and how it's going to be handled. As for the current time now, the what's going on now and your concerns with what's going on now, I can defer that answer to our Infrastructure Services Department.
Yeah, like the lights up King Street have nothing to do with the new development. They have to do with us now, but the new development is more
Yep.
people will also want the lights. That's all.
Appreciate that. I don't want to get into too much back and forth, but I do want to answer your questions. So, Mr. Poupé.
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Schwint. So the intersections in question here at Sawmill, Northside, and King or Hawkesville, they're all regionally controlled. So that's the real challenge. It really is a regional issue,
So-
frankly. So they do weigh in and they do comment on developments. So they do talk about those sorts of things. But as far as implementing a warrant study for an all-way stop, that would be a regional initiative that they would look to warrant. My gut says that the problem is there's so much traffic in certain legs and not enough in other legs. But it's certainly something we can raise with regional staff, and they can certainly do a review, and that's something that they should be able to provide back to us.
I just
Okay,
hate to be
thank
it
you.
too late, you know?
Understood.
Thank you. Appreciate bringing the current concerns as well. Oh, Councillor Grant, question.
Thank you. I just thought maybe while we're talking about process, if Ms. Fox or Ms. Fries could maybe talk a little bit more about explaining kind of why we do a service strategy first prior to plans of subdivision and how we can develop a strategy before we even know about the density or what the plan of subdivisions may entail. I think that was a question brought up by a resident. It might just be helpful for some clarification there.
Ms. Fries?
So I can start and then Lori can add to this as well. But yeah, the way that we're planning that area is we are trying to put a servicing strategy in place first. And then the developments that would develop on those lands would have to tie in with that servicing strategy. We're not at a point yet where we're ready to approve or recommend approval for the subdivisions in the area. But with council's endorsement of a servicing strategy, we can continue with the review of those plans of subdivision and ensure that their servicing plans for those subdivisions tie in with the overall servicing strategy. So the review of the actual subdivisions is still to come, and the actual construction and timing of when those changes happen on digging up Hawkesville Road won't happen until after the subdivisions are approved, and they do get kind of approved in a stepped manner. So it does take a while to fully build out a subdivision.
Okay. Thank you. We have another delegation. Jim Daniel.
Yes,
Welcome.
welcome. Hello, hello. My name is Jim Daniel. I live at 60 Hawkesville Road. I spoke here last week. I've listened to the three options. All three options there mention extending services to the two properties at the end of Hawkesville Road, that is before the railway track, namely 48 and 60 Hawkesville Road, Deborah Martin's and my property. Each of those three options there mentioned the fact that services could be extended to these two properties, which is good for us. I mean, there's no question about it. It keeps the value of our land up, which is good. I would ask a question is that if those services are extended to us, namely 48, Deborah and myself, what cost is that to us individually? You talk about the cost being borne by the developers. If they extend the services to us, is it going to cost us?
Do you have other questions, or is that your only question?
The other observation I have is I just listened to Mr. WalterFedy talk about the other option. I just mentioned all three options extend mentions extending the services to 48 and 60. Mr. Fedy said, well, we can use the existing one, which will not extend the services to, it cannot, because it's just simply not deep enough. It will not exist to 48 and 60. That, by extension, makes us service landlocked. We will not be able to sell our property or develop our property in any way, shape, or form. In other words, if we go with an option that does not extend services to us, what are we? Collateral damage?
Okay. Do you have other questions, or I'm trying to get you through your questions and then I'll get staff to answer them all at once.
I only asked to speak in response to points that had been raised during this meeting.
Thank you.
And those are the two that really
Those are the
concern
two
me.
that concern you.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Freeze?
So I just wanted to respond to that question about the cost to them. So the way that we would frame any development in the area would include a best efforts clause. So if they were to come forward with a development application within a certain time frame, then they would pay their portion of the cost for that servicing for the area. If they're not planning on redeveloping, then there's not.
Okay. Are there other questions? We do have one unregistered delegate who asked to speak, Vaughn Bender. I understand you were wishing to speak, at least the clerk told me that.
Yes, sorry. Excuse me, I didn't know if you were.
I guess actually I need a motion. Yeah, he's gonna correct me. I need a motion from council to hear Councillor Schwint, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? That's carried. You have 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Shantz and members of council. I'll try not to repeat anything from last week, and there's obviously been lots of fulsome discussion tonight. I just want to make one point of clarification for our neighbors at 56 and 60 Hawkesville Road, and you know, in response to discussion that's been taking place. I think, you know, really simplify it down. The Schlegel property is able to connect by gravity to existing gravity sewer on Hawkesville Road without lowering it. We appreciate that services only our lands. It is not the servicing solution for the low-lying Polocorp lands, and in fact does not service 56 and 60. You know, it's an additional option. There are, we suggest, many additional iterations here that that could be and should be, you know, thoroughly reviewed. I think any property owner along Hawkesville Road that could service by gravity to existing infrastructure would be here making the same submission this evening, that is the most practical, logical, and typically the most desired way to move forward with any develop, make the best use of existing infrastructure. That's a fairly high, you know, ranking priority in the matrix. We are not suggesting that we are unwilling to participate in the discussions about how to comprehensively service the rest of the lands in the area. We have heard loud and clear that that is a high priority. How those lands are serviced depends if a pumping station or lift stations for any smaller projects is absolutely off the table or not. And so, you know, that is a bit of the conundrum here. What are the options to service 56 and 60? Of course, what is the option to service the Polocorp lands? Depends on the answer to that question. So again, we submit that the report tonight, although staff may desire to have further clarification and direction from council on how to approach our applications, we don't feel that all of the many questions that are being raised, questions by the residents on Chris Court and so on, are, you know, thoroughly enough researched and answerable, if that's a word, before I'll say zoning in on this one and only approach. So, you know, we have asked for a reconsideration of the recommendations before you to the extent that we wish to not have them applied to us. On the other hand, we are fully supportive as well of this process not moving forward this evening and, the additional work being done. I committed to Ms. Freeze in conversation this afternoon. We are prepared to be at the table. We know we need to, continue to contribute and participate in finding the servicing solutions that work for the area. I feel fairly strongly about the principle that we have an opportunity to connect by gravity, and we should be, that should be in the mix of options. It should rank very highly for our lands, and more discussion needs to take place about how to service the other lands.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Bender? Okay, thank you. Normally, it's just at a public meeting that we ask if there's any extra delegations, but this has been a very important issue to the community. So if there's anyone else here today that would like to speak, we'll consider 5 minutes. You already spoke. Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Two minutes. If council says it's okay, I'm seeing nods. Come on up.
Sorry. Another, like the question with Jim, with our two homes that you're looking at, plan, whatever, they're all extended to in front of our property for sewer and water. I just want it also noted that we've been getting our water from across the road. There was a house there before. It's on Polocorp's property since 1945. That has been supplying our house with water. Jim has a well. How are these new subdivisions that they're going in and doing this and doing that and everything else? What happens if it affects his water? And you know darn well, Polycorp, when they start building, it's gonna affect our water because they'll be cutting it off. So I just want that to be also noted that we also, Jim and myself and my husband, we have our rights too to have water. Like I know he's talking about, the not having to hook us up or run up that way, but
Okay.
it's just something
Fair.
else you got to keep.
Question?
Bye.
Can you keep,
Okay, what?
can you keep track of that, or do you have an answer?
Yes, through the mayor. I do think I can maybe help a little bit with this. So typically when a servicing strategy for an area comes together like this, and we've extended services out to existing properties, if you are already connected to or being serviced in another way, let's say through a well or a septic, that can remain for you. There's no we don't force you to switch over. Okay, you can remain. If you have another alternative agreement, let's say with another landowner that you're maybe taking water from or something like that, that's your private agreement. We would have no part in that. And that's something that you would need to discuss with that landowner that you're taking the water, if that was going to be continued. In the future, if you needed to hook up to water or sewer, then it now would be in front of your property and you'd be able to do that.
Right, because
Okay.
the land that we do get our water from actually is owned now by Polycorp, and it's in their subdivision. But once they tear that shed down and everything, that will eliminate the water pumping water to our house.
Okay.
And is there not a grandfather clause that we've been receiving our water since 1945?
I think we don't know what kind of agreement you have or how that went.
The husband's grandparents owned both properties.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why it was in the family.
So that needs to be worked out between you and Polycorp and, when we do our services,
Okay.
I would say.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, there are no more, I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, go ahead. 5 minutes.
I'm George Karger and I live on Chris Court. So I have one question to ask of our experts here. In all the reading we get and all the discussions we had, nobody's ever mentioned vertical dimensions along this whole course you want to take. Now, we, through our buddies on CRISCOR, found out there's some program, and I don't know what it is. There's a 21-foot difference between that southwest corner where Polocorp is building and Chris Court. So that means, and you add the slope of the thing, there'll be roughly 25-foot gravity-fed downhill. You'll have to dig down that to get to Chris Court. Now, the sewer that runs south from Chris Court, last year we had two houses, those sewers broke, so they dug it up. They're only about 10 feet deep. How is the sewage that's now about 21 feet down going to get up to there?
Okay.
I'd like to see some vertical dimensions giving in all the writing that we did, all the stock on it, and nobody has any vertical dimensions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Through the mayor, I'll just attempt to answer that. When sewers back up, when there's issues with broken sewer laterals, so that's the sewer line that up to the connection of the house, often that's much shallower than the sewer is that's in the street. So when they dug down to repair that, it doesn't surprise me they would have come with a much shallower depth on that. But I mean, you want that, right? Because you want that grade difference from where it's connected to your house to where it goes into the sewer main.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we're now finished hearing from our delegations, and we'll move into council discussion and debate. So, council, are there any questions for staff? Councillor Cadeau.
I'll start us off. Just a general question. Do you ever have servicing strategies that are multi-pronged? And what I mean by that is you would have Polocorp have one avenue and you'd have Schlegel have another avenue, or do you look to do something comprehensively, I guess is what I'm asking.
Ms. Freeth.
Through you, Madam Mayor, so I can start, and again, Lori can add to this, but in a situation like this where there's a large portion of land that's added to the settlement area boundary, we look to develop a comprehensive strategy for that area. We'll be doing a comprehensive strategy that will evolve over time with the Breslau area that's been added to the settlement area as well. If an individual property was added on its own to the settlement area, which depending on what year you're in with provincial legislation, it was allowed, wasn't allowed, it changes over time, but then we would look at an individual service and connection.
Councillor Schwint.
Just wondering if we got the slide on the pricing or the cost and the three options come up in terms of order of magnitude.
Is that the one you want?
Yep. So.
Oh. Do we have it back? This. There we go.
So there's definitely huge differences between the three options, but comparing option 1 and 3, I guess I'm wondering what the downside is going ahead with option 3 on the Polocorp lands, and in the fullness of time figuring out what the right option is for the other parcels. I'm trying to see what the downside is for the Polocorp lands. It's still the cheapest option with or without a cost share agreement, is it not?
Through the mayor to the councillor, yes, I believe the least expensive option would be through the Chris Court. That would be the least expensive to build, and also the least, obviously the least expensive to maintain through its life cycle. The cost for the pump station that we got, we based that on a couple of pump stations that have been built in the last few years, and we know what the cost of those pump stations were. And those were built to our standards. And that's why, that's where I got that sort of that estimate. I would not expect much of a change in that as far as a pump station on this property.
So based on those values, what is the downside of having a strategy solely for the Polocorp lands today and figuring out the other properties as we go?
Sorry, through the mayor to the councillor again, and Deanne can assist with this as well, but that then is not a comprehensive servicing strategy. That's what my job here was to do, was to present a comprehensive servicing strategy that considered all of the expanded lands in this area, and that's what we did. And based on that comprehensive strategy that includes all of the lands, including the expanded lands to the west, this summary is accurate. Other than that, if you're talking about allowing individual developments to service individually, that's not a comprehensive servicing strategy, and that's not what we're here to talk about.
Ms. Freese.
If I can just add to that, I would say the other thing that staff is considering, and the reason why staff is proposing the comprehensive solution, is because we do feel that it is the responsibility of the township to ensure that all the costs for the servicing are shared by all the developers in the area, and not just the responsibility of one developer to service all the other lands in the area. A comprehensive solution would require all costs to be shared amongst all developers.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks for that. That does help. And forgive me for asking a hypothetical question. But I think one of the delegates brought it up, and it was an important point. You know, let's say the Polocorp lands go through their approval process, and during the archaeological dig, they find something that stalls out the progress and doesn't allow them to move forward. You know, we haven't approved of anything here yet, and that would throw a wrench in things. Would we still go forward with this strategy if none of those lands would be developed?
So yeah, I can answer that through you, Madam Mayor. So as I think I mentioned this before, the first developer in can go ahead without the other developer going. They would have to front end those costs. This can be done through a voluntary easement through the Polocorp's lands, or an expropriated easement through those lands. So even if one developer doesn't go ahead, the other still can.
I think Nathan's question was more, if Polocorp, if those lands were not available for development for some reason, then what would you be recommending as a servicing option?
So they could still service through those lands even if they couldn't develop them, but then it would be at the full cost of the other developer in the area, which in this case, it would be the Schlegels, to service right through there with either a voluntary or an expropriated easement. So are you saying that they wouldn't even be allowed to put an easement through?
Why would they need to?
The lands would be privately owned, so you do need an easement through them.
Go ahead.
We've heard through the delegates that there could be a potential for the Schlegel development to tie in and be gravity fed, though. And so if this development weren't to go forward for whatever reason, you know, would they still need to go the route of Chris Court, or could they tie in at Hawkesville, I guess is my question.
So again, I can start and Lori can weigh in through you, Madam Mayor. The issue with the option presented to connect through gravity only to Hawkesville and not lower them would result in the other properties wouldn't be a comprehensive servicing solution for the area.
Through the mayor, I was just going to add to that. We did hear from the engineer. I think we're in agreement. One thing we're in agreement with here is that the lands cannot be serviced to the west. The comprehensive strategy, the lands to the west cannot be serviced through their gravity sewer, even if it could connect to an existing service on Hawkesville Road, if it were deep enough. It does not expand services to include 60 and 56. And then, so that there basically would be a standalone servicing.
Ms. Freeze.
So the short answer is, even if the Polocorp lands never develop, we would still be recommending this servicing solution, if that clarifies.
Councillor Schwint.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that concept a little bit. Taking an easement from on land that won't be developed, but setting that aside, do we need to have one comprehensive plan for this portion of St. Jacobs, or can we have two comprehensive plans, one servicing South Hawkesville Road, one servicing north of it? And we talked about those two orphan pieces of land, I'm going to call them. We want to make sure that they can be serviced somehow. My understanding is in the Schlegel plans, they'll be raising the southwest corner somewhat. So I would assume that if those other two properties were developed, they'll probably be raised similarly, in which case our gravity problem disappears, does it?
Through the mayor, no, because they wouldn't have a service in front of their property, right? If Schlegel develops independently and connects to an existing shallow property that can't be extended to the west, then number 60 and 56 would not, at any development, wouldn't be able to connect because there's no sewer in front of their property.
But there isn't either, so my assumption would be that that development will require sewer put in. If height's the only issue and they're raising their property up anyway, doesn't that problem disappear?
Well, they would have to extend the sewer then.
Yep.
They can't extend the sewer because it's too shallow. That sewer that's there now can't make it, as the engineer pointed out, can't make it all the way to the west.
Even if that is lifted up?
It doesn't matter. The sewer can't be extended to the front of 60 and 56. That's there now, that they're under that scenario they would be connecting to.
Because of frost depths?
It's because of the depth of the existing sewer. It's not very deep, really, at its ending point now. It's right around, I believe, it's of a sufficient depth right now of what it's being used for, but it needs to be extended, and it's fighting grade. The road is actually going down, and then the sewer has to go up. So as it gets closer and closer to their entrance, it gets shallower and shallower, right? So unless we're going to rebuild the road, which I think the region's not going to do, then it will get to a point where it can't go any further to the west. And
you'd have to raise the train tracks too.
there you go.
Any other questions? Okay. What would council like to do with the recommendation that's before you? Councillor Burgess.
I can just ask a question, through you, Mayor
Sure.
Johns. I guess to get staff's opinion or council, if we were to approve this tonight, like right now, I'm thinking of deferring it and whatnot until we get more data, but if we put in a clause along the lines of, this is a comprehensive strategy, but if there's a gravity-fed option available, that can be completed and done by the developer, if that makes sense. So we approve this with an exclusion that says if there's a current tie-in via gravity available, that they don't have to be part of this cost sharing.
Sorry, through the mayor, do you mean a gravity solution that encompasses the entire development, expanded development area?
So instead of specifically labeling a property number or an area, if there is an existing gravity solution that they can tie into that and use that instead of being tied to this new comprehensive strategy. So you're just allowing an out if someone has an alternate solution that is existing and in place.
I think the concern there is the cost sharing piece, but Ms. Freeze?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, I think that would defeat the purpose of the comprehensive strategy that's cost shared by all the developers in that area. The only other gravity option that would be available is the very deep sewer in Hawkesville, which was presented as a option, but more expensive and more disruptive option.
But I guess that's where I'm going to is right now we're getting the mixed messages from the developer and from staff. So if there is not an option available, they would fall under this. But if they are able to tie in and the data and engineers say so, that they can proceed with that option. And then that allows council, if they are comfortable approving this for you guys, to put the strategy in place, but then it allows an out if there are other options.
Ms. Freeze?
So I can comment on that through you, Madam Mayor. Council can choose that. It is not supported by staff because it would not be a comprehensive solution to the area.
If council made that choice, what would your option be as staff? You want to think about that? Councillor Grant. I'll let you guys think about that for a bit. Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Through you to the rest of council. My own personal feeling is I do not feel confident that we have enough information before us tonight to make a decision on this, fully realizing that we have anxious residents as well as developers who would like an answer so that they can stop living in limbo. As it stands, I feel we have received some conflicting information. I would like some more information if possible. One thing is, did we do our own in-house study on this, or have we outsourced to a third party that can do another review for us so that we can have kind of maybe a neutral party, just so to speak, provide us with an idea of what is the best option moving forward? I also know that both Schlegel and Polocorp are still in the process of talking about how a cost sharing agreement would look like. So that would also buy them some more time to have more discussions on that. These are just kind of some of the ideas that are circulating in my head today.
Ms. Freeze?
So as are options that can service the individual properties. However, the comprehensive options are the ones that are presented and have been reviewed by our development engineering staff. As we review development applications, they would have to tie in and we would get more and more information, but that happens as we move along through processing of those development applications. I don't know what else I can say there, but we do feel like we have sufficient information, and the only option that is presented as an alternative would not provide that comprehensive plan for the area.
Councillor Grant, did you want to follow up on that, or?
Oh, no, sorry. I thought my hand would lower after I spoke.
Councillor Schwint.
I'm getting closer to Councillor Burgess's page. I see having a southern comprehensive plan for the southern properties and a northern comprehensive plan for the northern properties. One developer has come forward with gravity-based solution that only looks after them. I think with some work and some discussions, there's a way for that plan to also incorporate 58 and 60 because they should not be left as orphans. So we're still meeting the intent of being comprehensive, but I believe we should have flexibility for two options. A parcel this big. In the fullness of time, I'm pretty sure that we'll end up with staff's recommendation, but by forcing it today, we're going to interfere in business, and I don't like doing that.
Ms. Freeze.
So I think the risk that council has two servicing options and Schlegel is able to service on their own and then Polocorp and the other properties service together, it would result in it not being financially viable for those properties that are at the end of Hawkesville to ever develop because the cost would be too high.
Sorry, I was lumping those other two properties with the Schlegel property, not with the Polocorp property. So the Schlegel everything north of Hawkesville Road needs a comprehensive plan that works.
So that has been reviewed, and that comprehensive plan is that deeper sewer option. So that has been reviewed as an option and has been presented.
So I,
Sorry.
yeah, Councillor Fox, Ms. Fox.
Apologize. Through the mayor, the thing that I wanted to note is that the Schlegel property is a large property, as we know, on the north side. There's a natural dividing ridge through that property right now that, as the engineer pointed out, sends a lot of that property, stormwater management and design-wise, to the north, and that would be serviced out through and out to Northside Drive. So when you're talking about separate sort of servicing, they already that property already has that. They have a servicing option to Northside Drive for the bulk of their property. Actually, I think it's somewhere around 70 or 75%. And then it's only the remaining small 25% of their property or such that comes down to that Hawkesville Road that would be, included in discussions and between them and Polocorp for cost sharing. And then obviously their share of what else is being serviced within the corridor. As Deanne said, the options that came forward, all of them can service those two properties to the west. The only option that can't do that is an option where Schlegel connects to that existing sanitary sewer there if they're able to do that. That option basically leaves out all of Polocorp, and it also leaves out those two properties to the west.
Ms. Freeze?
I just want to express that this is a time-sensitive decision, and the reason why is because we would lose the opportunity to go through Chris Court if Polocorp don't proceed with this option. That would mean that we would be pivoting to the deep sewer option because it's the only other option that meets all of the requirements for the comprehensive servicing strategy in the area that encompasses all the properties and doesn't result in additional infrastructure of pumping stations. So if council is not comfortable making a decision, I'm not saying you have to, but I would say that it will cost more and more disruption in the longer run because we'd have to pivot.
And what's the time frame on that?
I think we'd have to refer to Polocorp for what their timing is for the purchase of that property, but my understanding was it was the end of February. Okay.
Councillor Schwint, did I see your hand earlier?
Yeah. I was wondering if by allowing for that northern option, it doesn't preclude the solution for the Schlegel lands on 58 and 60 to be still tying into Polocorp and Chris Court. It just gives them an option that if they come up with something else that works, we're not allowing them to orphan those two properties though.
Yes, so that is council's decision. I just would caution that staff would not support that solution because it doesn't provide the cost sharing benefit for the entire area.
When it comes to cost sharing, I think Ms. Fox mentioned this, and I just want to make sure that I get this right. Because approximately 75% or so of the water flows to the back end of the Schlegel property, does that mean that they'll be contributing about 25%, whereas Polocorp would be kind of contributing 100%? Just how would that kind of line up?
Through the mayor to the councillor, no, it wasn't my intention to insinuate that. The exact numbers would really depend on each development's contribution, involvement in the infrastructure build, and the effects that has on each of the developers. What my point on that was to state that part of the Schlegel property is already serviced through to a different location. So they would be contributing only part of their property to this system. The amount, that's something that they would work out together.
So just for my clarity, because there've been a lot of ideas thrown around, the comprehensive servicing strategy that you're referring to in the recommendation here is that Schlegel would outlet to North Side Drive for the north part. And then the south part would be part of the, what is what you're recommending, right? Okay.
Looking at Polocorp's land, if council doesn't proceed, isn't the cheapest method of servicing that land still the Chris Court with or without cost sharing?
Through the mayor to the councillor. I believe it is. I believe that's still even, I mean, they have to consider the cost, obviously, for purchasing the property to run it through. But our estimates on the price of the pump station alone is so high that that I think that's going to be, it would be definitely less expensive than the deep sewer option.
So then if we extend that, give them approval, and the best efforts clause, so if in the future Schlegel's decide to tie in, there's a cost sharing. But we're not forcing them to tie in if there's an alternative solution for those northern properties. What's the downside? Cost sharing still happens if it turns out to be the best solution.
Through the mayor to the councillor, when we think about servicing the entire area, including the two properties to the west, there really isn't another option. The deep sewer option or through to Chris Court are the only two options. There are no other options that I can think of. Unless, like we do, you know, we've made it clear that a pump station is not, you know, not really a good option because it adds cost to the township, future replacement costs and all of that.
But those properties, if they were redeveloped and raised and serviced north, would that work?
You're talking about servicing it through the Schlegel property?
Tying into their laterals?
That's
Would require one easement probably?
I think that the sewer in the Schlegel property would have to be very, very deep at that location to be able to pick up those lots, even if they were raised up, right? I think you're talking about raising them up level with the back of the lots, right?
I think we talked about that early on in our discussions, and it would mean extremely high retaining walls along the road. Are there other questions? No. The other piece that we haven't really talked about and is weighing for timing too is people care and the property that they have behind the church and their desire, their need to develop while the money is still available for them. So that's the other piece that sort of fits into the puzzle. What do you want to do, council? I'm sensing that we're not quite ready to make a decision.
But we don't like the options.
But we don't like the options. Councillor Cadell.
For me, I'd feel more comfortable, much to Councillor Grant's point, if we had a third party review the costing, especially since we have such discrepancies coming forward to us. It makes it really difficult to justify a decision based on cost. We have estimates that vary so much.
Do we have any sense of what a peer review would cost?
Our timeline?
Our timeline?
February 10th is our next meeting.
Mr. Brenneman, can I call on your wisdom?
Well, through you, Madam Mayor, I would still lean on Lori and Deanne, but my experience is that would be pretty expeditious to think a peer review would be back by February 10th, even with putting pressure on, but I guess miracles can happen.
Ms. Fries?
Yeah, I don't think we can get a peer review done by February 10th. That's my, I'm not saying I won't try,
that's
but
a reasonable assessment. It would be pretty tough, but
Would it make sense for us to defer this for an hour and talk about water budget? And maybe the two developers would have a conversation because they may have an idea that we haven't thought of and converse with staff.
we're making the clerk twitchy.
Oh, you're not making me twitch at
Oh.
all. Through you, Mayor Shantz, I was only going to suggest if council wants to hear the presentation, we could do that. If a recess would also be something that might help. Sometimes that helps in these situations as well.
Would you, yeah, I think I prefer the idea of a recess and we finish this up. There's people kind of waiting. So why don't we take, is 15 minutes enough, do you think? Councillor Schwint, did you want to talk to the developers and you've got,
I want to ask them to talk to each other and to staff and see if we can come up with a compromise. Otherwise,
okay.
I'm really worrying we're picking winners.
So can we talk to staff and Matt and Mike, I guess? I appreciate you don't have your experts with you, but yeah. And Eric, do you want to? Okay. Let's see if we can do that in 15 minutes. Thank you. We're back in council chambers. Council, we have a recommendation from staff. What do you want to do with it? I'm comfortable with silence.
This isn't a fun decision for anybody on council, I don't think, or for the community. It's a tough one. We're trying to make the best of many competing different interests and alternatives. And competing by, I mean, what's more important, short-term cost or long-term cost, ease of maintenance, treating every new developer equitably, or existing residents, and how do we minimize impact overall? Personally, this may not be popular, but I do believe the Chris Court option can be done with minimal impact to the Chris Court residents. If that house remains, the easement's narrowed, and it's a 2 to 6 week timeline to install that sewer solution to the problem at hand. Where I'm really bogged down is how we develop a cost sharing mechanism between the Schlegels and Polocorp. I don't believe council wants to be tilting the scales one way or the other, and it appears to me tonight we're going to have to at some point, because there isn't agreed upon solution from the two developers at hand. Third point is council seems pretty adamant, and I support the fact we don't want to leave those two properties on Hawkesville Road as orphans. They've got to be part of a comprehensive plan. So saying that, I'd make a motion where we support the Chris Court servicing for the Polocorp lands and give Schlegels the opportunity to develop an alternative plan that includes their property as well as 58 and 60. The two properties on the north side of Hawkesville. They come up with an alternative plan that works for all those properties. I would support it being separate from the Polocorp one. I don't know if the clerk can make sense of that.
How is that different from staff's, the recommendation that's before us? Ms. Freese?
I think what I'm hearing is that it would be to support a servicing solution through Chris Court for the Polocorp lands and allow 52 Hawkesville to determine their own servicing solution.
Provided it also supports servicing for 56 and 58. Sorry, 56 and 60. And that may very well include. We have the map back up, please.
7 would be that property on the south side, that the corner of the Polocorp property.
On the east.
It has,
It's like, okay, so we're okay there. My expectation is over time we may find that Schlegels and the other two properties do tie into the Polocorp land, but I'd like the market to figure that out, not us.
Can you put that up on the screen? Is there a seconder? Councillor Burgess. Discussion? Councillor Grant.
Thank you. Maybe just through you to rest council, I'm just looking for some clarification on this motion. Is this essentially just saying we're going to do the service strategy as presented, but give basically Schlegel an alternative option or an exit clause essentially, provided that they can service both 56 and 60? Is that kind of the intent?
Councillor Schwint.
That's the intent, yes. Includes the reduced easement on the Chris Court property to minimize disruption in the neighborhood.
I guess this would then, if the intent of a comprehensive servicing strategy is that it is an equitable cost sharing mechanism for various developers, how does that make this equitable? If Schlegel can have its own kind of clause, like I guess it's my question is Polycorp bearing the brunt of this servicing strategy if Schlegel has its own ability to provide a different service?
Councillor Burgess, did you want to comment? Did you want to reply to Councillor Grant or Councillor Schwint or staff?
I had a question, but I can also reply to it if you want me to.
Go ahead.
I think to Councillor Schwint's earlier comments, we're not trying to tip the scales either way. So neither of them is perfectly equitable. You could view it from the other perspective as why is Schlegel having to pay for this servicing that they don't actually even need? So how is that equitable to them? So the argument can be made both ways, and that's the challenge. But then following up on that, if I may, to Councillor Schwint or staff, why are we tying the two properties to Schlegel's versus the comprehensive strategy? Like what? Why is it easier to run from the south side to those ones in the future too? I just don't know why that has to be tied at this point to strictly that side.
I guess my purpose there is I don't want to leave those two properties orphaned in terms of servicing. And this, I do believe to some degree in a comprehensive plan for the area. So I'm just dividing the areas in the north of Hawkesville Road and south of Hawkesville Road. Over time, if there's a plan that comes forward that makes more sense for 58 and 60 to feed south into the Polocorp servicing area, intuitively that makes a bit of sense. But let's let developers figure that out over time versus saying thou shalt go this way or that way.
I appreciate that. I just want to make sure that motion reflects that then.
God.
Mayor Shantz, this is my first attempt. But I would be more than happy for any clarification or corrections to my attempt here. I tried to take the original option in the report, and then I think I heard a proven principle, the Chris Court servicing solution with a reduced easement for the Polocorp lands, and allow I guess, I don't know if this is the right way to say it, but allow the Schlegel lands to determine the servicing strategy that works for their lands and provides a suitable servicing option for 44, 56, and 60 Hawkesville Road. I don't know why that thing is there, but there we go. Is that somewhat the end? Oh, sorry.
It keeps moving.
Yeah. Deanne, can you help me?
Yes, I can help a little bit. So I think that second bullet can come out, right? Because we won't need that anymore.
Okay.
And then the addresses would be to the servicing solution on 51, 55, and 57 Hawkesville. That's the address of the Schlegel Corp, the Polocorp property connecting through Chris Court. And then the other properties would be 52 Hawkesville, that's the Schlegel property, 56 and 60 Hawkesville. Just want to make sure that we've got.
Oh,
So there's
nothing about 44.
no,
Okay.
nothing about 44. 47, yeah, 47 would be in there as well. So I'm thinking the 47 would be up with the servicing solution for Schlegel's. So that's 51, 55. So Polocorp lands Polocorp's lands also include 57, right? 51 and 55, not 57. Okay, so my map shows 57 there, so okay. And
Sorry,
then,
can you say that again?
sorry, Polocorp lands, that's correct. Schlegel lands are at 52. And then the other properties that would need to be serviced along Hawkesville would be 47, 56, and 60. So 47 by default is further up the road, so that one won't be an issue, but we should be including it as wording. And the easement was not through the Polocorp lands, but through the Chris Court property. Sorry.
Is that right?
That's my understanding of what council asked for.
Councillor Schwint, does that capture your motion?
Which one's 47 again, sorry?
47 is the one on the south side of Hawkesville, closest to Chris Court, between Chris Court and then 47, and then there's the entrance to the Polocorp lands at 55. I don't know if it's possible to pull up.
Put up first map, I can point it out.
Here's just a
There you go.
GIS.
47, yeah.
They're already serviced off of that existing sanitary there. However, they're a development. I apologize.
Is there anyone?
Sure. So that 47 is already serviced through the existing sanitary sewer that comes down here. They're basically the last service connection there for the residential property. So, but the servicing strategy would include that property as a contributing, if it got developed.
Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to the rest of council. When I'm looking at that motion, I'm wondering what the advantage of actually passing it is. Is it a comprehensive strategy now, or is it just a strategy for two developers? And do we need to have a comprehensive strategy, or can staff just work through the developers to get this accomplished? Like, what's the value if we've changed this to kind of be multi-pronged? What's the value of having this strategy?
Ms. Freeze?
So staff will continue to recommend this strategy as staff's preference through development applications, but it would just come forward as a recommendation, not as a council endorsed servicing strategy. And then council could choose to approve applications outside of that. So if there was an application that came forward with a pumping station, we would recommend not supporting it because we would still be pointing towards this servicing strategy.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Councillor Bryant? No, you're still muted. There you go.
Problem with that. How much of a reduction is he looking for in the accessibility, the easement?
Councillor Schwint?
I'd have to, staff came up with a number, I'm not sure, what was 5.7 or
7.5.
7.5?
Is that a reasonable number to allow them to work on that, or is that pushing it so tight that they wouldn't be able to do work in the future if they needed to?
So 7 meters is a pretty standard depth for standard width of an easement for a standard depth service underneath it. So provided that the service isn't a deep service underneath that easement, 7 meters does usually provide enough space for a 200 millimeter sanitary to go through it.
So if they were doing tunneling, they would have an issue then, would they not?
I don't think we're recommending tunneling.
Okay, just asking questions. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
To follow up on Councillor Bryant's question, should we perhaps have the size of the easement in the motion instead of just leaving it as reduced in easement?
I'm not an engineer. Councillor Freeze or Councillor Freeze?
Yeah, I will let Lori respond to that as well as this is the width that we're hoping for, but I wouldn't want to be tied so tight that it has to be exactly that 7.2.
Yeah, sorry,
Ms. Fox.
exactly. We don't know. Like we said, we don't have the designs for the development coming through there. You know, if we just think about the height of the sewer that, the minimum height of the sewer running through there, because as the engineer mentioned, if there's nothing connected to it, the minimum depth, the 2.8 meters below grade would be okay, and a 2.8 meter depth sewer would fit in a 7, possibly less meter easement. But I would suggest we don't name a size if we don't have to.
Okay, nope, that makes sense. My other question was, I know that Polycor provided a letter, it was in our package, confirming that they would not be using 9 Chris Court as a roadway. Is there a way that we could add that to the motion that has teeth, or is that something that we just kind of have to take their word on it?
I guess that's up to the mover.
Lowering the easement means that house doesn't get removed. A portion of it may, but the bulk of that house remains, then stays a house.
We can put it furthermore that
I'm happy to hear wording on that.
Perhaps furthermore, that the developer will maintain the existing house to the best of its ability, to the best of their ability, or maintain the usage of the property.
house or maintain.
Yeah. Knowing that, you know, a house could be renovated, could be changed, but the intent being that, you know, it's not going to become a multi-use trail, it's not going to become a roadway or anything like that.
Ms. Freeze?
You know, that's fine as long as it says a house, not the house, because we don't know the structural integrity of that existing house.
Okay. Jen was madly typing for us. In the meantime, is there any more
For you, Mayor Shantz, if I can just make one more amendment, possibly if Councillor Schwin's open to it, is you're kind of dividing it up right now, the north side of the road and the south side of the road. So I think we should remove 47 as not part of Schlegel's responsibility there, because that's kind of on the south side and part of the Polycorp area.
I tend to agree, but I'm curious staff's position on that.
My suggestion would be to not, to say all lands in the development area, because that encompasses both the 2 properties to the west and then also that property, number 47 on the south. As I mentioned, 47 is already connected, whereas the 2 properties to the west are not. So 47, the only way that they would develop would become part of this is if they developed in the future. Their standing connection would be fine. It would stay in place. If that help, I hope that helps. It's gravity now to the existing sewer. So
Just trying to come up with a scenario where it wouldn't work in the future.
But 47 is serviced today.
Yep. So what change could happen that they couldn't be able to connect if that property's redeveloped?
it would be like a multi-residential use or something, like some sort of development that required a larger service than they have. Or if it needed multiple services for severed lots or something like that.
You want it in, Council Burgess, or out?
I would suggest removing it. I think you're putting a lot on the one developer there, putting a big area.
Divide north and south, take it out.
Can you put it up for us?
Again, I tried to do a little bit of wordsmithing while we were talking. I hope I got this right. But it's to approve in principle the Chris Court servicing solution with the reduced, we didn't put a size in, easement through 9 Chris Court for the Polocorp lands at 51 and 55 Hawkesville Road, and allow the Schlegel lands at 52 Hawkesville Road to determine a servicing strategy that works for their lands and provides a suitable servicing option for 56 and 60 Hawkesville Roads, and also to direct Polocorp to ensure a house remains at 9 Chris Court.
Okay. Anything further? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I'll call a question. All in favor? That's carried. Okay. Thank you. This has been a really tough one, for all the reasons that Councillor Schwint has articulated and other councillors as well. Thank you to staff. Thank you to the developers. There's been a lot of work, a lot of meetings trying to work through these pieces, and look forward to bring it to fruition. Okay, thanks. Now we're going to move into water and wastewater budget. Okay. Calm.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, thank you. I was just waiting for the room to clear out a little bit, so I didn't have to talk over anyone. So as per your direction, we formatted this as a bit of a water and wastewater workshop. Next few slides will go through it a little bit more, but this the water and wastewater budget still needs to be passed. This approach is consistent with previous years where we pass the tax-supported budget and then we follow up with the water and wastewater budget. Historically, this is the way we've done it, but it still follows the same strong mayor's process. So just for council and the public's benefit, we haven't actually released the water and wastewater budget. That is part of the strong mayor's budget that will be released actually probably this week. But the purpose of this discussion is to go through, remind council of some of the high-level factors that go into the water and wastewater rates, have kind of a discussion, and then meet further with Mayor Shantz to kind of discuss some of this feedback, take her opinions into account, and then propose a more formal line-by-line water and wastewater budget. Utility and tax budgets are intertwined. We'll be going through a lot of these things. So unfortunately or fortunately, some of the decisions have already been made, but the goal is to combine a lot of these budgets in future years where this would be more, instead of showing it separately, we'll just be showing this is more of a division in combination with the entire budget process. But again, your indulgence is appreciated as we kind of navigate this new first strong mayor's water and wastewater budget. So again, capital is already approved. So the water and wastewater capital program is already included in the tax supported budget. It's a little unusual to have the separate budgets, but then have capital. But again, going forward, we'll merge all of them together, so there won't be that separation. One item to highlight before we get into it a little bit is the cost allocation that we went through kind of extensively during the tax supported budget. It also affects water and wastewater. So we'll be going through that in a little bit more detail, but essentially a lot of the costs that get charged goes to this cost allocation bucket. But then when they're the jobs actually, that's when it gets charged to the water and wastewater budget. So the improvements that we made on the cost allocation side and the tax supported should help the water and wastewater side as well. So we added 273,000. So that should avoid any deficits being partially allocated to the water wastewater budgets. And then just again for context, the BMA study we presented last year proposed a 7% increase for water and an 11% increase for wastewater. That was primarily driven by a capital plan, but that's also kind of some of the parameters that we're using for some of these slides. Again, just some history. So this is really our operating budget. So we were, utility budgets tend to fluctuate more than tax supported budgets, primarily because consumption can change, which drives revenue. On the tax side, we essentially get 99, 98% of all of our revenue. And eventually we usually get 100%, just the timing. It can fluctuate a lot more on the water and wastewater side because it's really driven by consumption. But as council is well aware, for the last 3 years, we've had significant water and wastewater deficits. 2022 and 2024 particularly were over $1 million or around $1 million. So roughly like 2.5 million of deficits from the utility budget. I'm happy to report, at least in 2025, all the preliminary numbers that we've seen, we haven't obviously closed 2025, are trending much better in 2025. Not sure exactly where it'll land, but we're probably trending potentially a small surplus in water and a moderate deficit in wastewater, but nowhere near the extent that we have seen in recent years, maybe somewhere closer to the 2018. If I had to pick a number, maybe that would be my guess, maybe 2017, but nowhere near how we have been trending. So we have turned a corner, at least in the short term, for this. And part of that is some of the actions that we've taken to date. Those include greater understanding of our costing model. We still, we keep referring to it as peeling back the onion, but we keep finding new things and have a greater understanding. This helps us improve accuracy in a lot of our costing models and the water, wastewater, and the tax supported budgets. We've improved our overhead allocation, but there's still more work to be done. We've identified some large industrial user which had low reads or weren't being billed properly. We've replaced those meters and we've generated pretty significant revenue in 2025 for that. We've also established water and wastewater contingency reserves. I think that was a critical decision last year to kind of help us with that contingency item, because previously all of those deficits had to be funded through the capital program. Now we're starting to build up some contingency reserve. We added meters to township assets, splash pads, and facilities, making sure everything has a meter. And we've also convened an internal working group that meets on a regular basis to discuss these discrepancies, and we report back to council with some of those findings. I'll just go through very quickly. This is just the water rate history for council's benefit. For the most part, the blue bars essentially are the water for the township, and the green bars are the water rates for the region. You can see mostly we've been fairly in line with the region, but in recent years we've exceeded the region for the regional charges in 2024 and 2025. We're actually proposing, at least in this budget, being more in line with the water rates in 2026, but that's just giving some of that history. Wastewater, Again, they're higher rates, but we're more or less in line with the region. 2021 is a bit of an off year because we had that pause for COVID. But then we have a bit of a catch up, and in 2025 and 2024, we're a little bit higher than the region. Again, we're proposing to bring that a little bit back down, but we were lower than the region for many years before that, so some of that is also catch up. Just a reminder, these are the current rates right now, 227 for water, to 372 for wastewater. And then we have that reserve contribution, and I have the asterisk beside that. So again, council may remember in 2025 that we indexed that reserve contribution. Previously, that was stuck at $26 for 15 years. So that's one of the drivers also of our low reserve balances. We weren't indexing those reserve contributions annually. We've kind of instigated a policy where now we're going to be indexing them every time we propose new rates. We'll also be proposing new reserve contribution rates. So that'll help us keep pace with inflation. This is just a quick comparator. There's different ways of looking at this. This doesn't take into consumption, but this is an absolute rate comparison to some of our peers. So we're on the higher end, unlike taxes, where we always seem to be on the lower end. On the higher end, we're on the higher end when it comes to utility rates. Kitchener is still a little bit higher, but we're a little bit higher than a lot of our comparators. And part of that, I believe, is also the way we allocate costs, and we'll go through that in some detail. So part of the way we keep taxes low is we allocate costs into the utility budgets, but that has the opposite effects where it raises some of the utility rates. It would be good to bring those more in balance, really to be more accurate, but in order to do that, that would increase taxes. So it's kind of an either or thing. It's either in the utility rates or the tax rates. The costs need to be absorbed. So this is essentially, in a nutshell, how we set our rates for council and the public. It's essentially a bit of a formula. We take the regional wholesale rate. So the region charges us for water, and they charge us to treat our wastewater. Then we add in, that's kind of our base cost. Then we add in our own direct costs. So these are the direct costs of running the water and wastewater system. And that includes direct salaries for our staff and materials. We also attribute a certain amount for indirect costs. And that includes things like admin support, but also other overheads. And then we talked a little bit about the reserve contribution, that fixed charge. So we have the operating contingency comes from the rates, and the capital contribution comes from that fixed charge. And then so that essentially we have the total costs, and then we divide it by how much consumption we feel. And so that's a bit of an estimate as well, because it does fluctuate. And that's essentially how we set our water and wastewater rates. So we set a number of costs that we need to cover. We estimate the consumption number, and that's how the water and wastewater rates are set. So just going through some of those in a little bit more detail. The water charges, the township portion of that is around $1 or so. That portion covers our cost. The region charges $1.26, so that's the wholesale cost of distribution. So that's how we get, and these are 2025 rates, $2.27, and that's what's charged currently on the bills, and it roughly works out to 44% of the cost of the bills are related to township costs. On the sewer side, it's a little bit more complicated. It's the same kind of formula, but on that township portion, and that's where that asterisk is, that $2.24, that includes an amount for the North Sanitary, or the Victoria North Sanitary Pumping Station. So Kitchener charge us roughly $1.10 per cubic meter. It's actually blended into their regional rate. But part of that $2.24 that we're showing here includes the Kitchener component. So that's why it's considerably higher than what we're showing on the water side, because there's the element of the Kitchener component that we need to cover. It's not an exact one-for-one. You can't exactly take that $2.24 minus the $1.10, because that rate doesn't apply to all users. It's kind of a blended rate, but essentially that's what we have to pay. And then the region pay the $1.48, and so it's a little bit higher than the wastewater. And so that's how we get to the $3.72. So again, even though it's showing 60% here, a significant portion of that is actually made up of Kitchener costs. But it's not the full rate in there. And just as an FYI, for the regional costs this year were estimated to be 5.9% for both water and wastewater. So those will be going up by 5.9%. They set kind of 5-year water and wastewater rates. So that's the numbers that they gave us for 2026. And we included in the budget for that. The next line in that formula, you'll remember, is direct costs. So normally direct costs are the costs directly attributed to running the system. Just to be clear, we do not directly budget for water and wastewater staff in our budget. We don't attribute those water and wastewater operators directly in the budget. It goes through this more complicated process and this cost allocation, and then it gets charged back based on the jobs that happen. And you have to make sure that you allocate all of those costs. Otherwise, you end up with this remainder, which happened for the last 5 years, but we've hopefully rectified in this year's budget. But 50% of that cost allocation deficit gets allocated to the utility budgets. So one thing also in this, because all of these group of individuals includes both the roads operators and the water and wastewater operators, there is no real distinction necessarily between who's doing what job. So potentially you could have water wastewater operators doing plow work because they also get charged to the roadside. But then water operators tend to get paid more because they have extra licensing arrangements. So the cost of some of the jobs are actually higher because we have kind of specialized staff doing non-specialized work, but we still have to pay them the rate. Equipment costs are also combined in this cost allocation methodology, which means that we don't directly contribute out of the water wastewater reserve for water wastewater equipment. It's bundled into this cost allocation. Something I'd like to move towards is having a separate water and wastewater equipment reserve, so it's more clear which costs are being used to fund this, but more analysis is needed to break that out. That's kind of a standard practice. But all of this means that it makes benchmarking, kind of comparing us to other municipalities and some efficiency analysis more difficult because we're not really sure if the right costs are in the right buckets, essentially. So it makes some of those comparators and some of those analysis more difficult. The other component, again, going through those are the next stage here is the indirect costs, which I call kind of salary allocation. So this is a list. I'm not showing salaries here. These are the percentages. So these are the allocations of the existing costs that get allocated to the water and wastewater budgets, the utility budgets. So there's a number of positions in there, in particular, the manager of operations, the director of infrastructure. It's essentially charged 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So 1/3 of their salaries go to roads or the whole road program. 1/3 go to water and 1/3 go to wastewater. So essentially 67% of a number of staff go to water and wastewater. And then you can see some of the breakdown there. Obviously, some like the compliance and admin assistant that's dedicated to water and wastewater. So that makes sense. We also have some finance support. Our revenue analyst is 50% water wastewater, 50% tax. We also have billing clerk that's directly to support that. That revenue and water clerk is actually for customer service. And then our manager of revenue also oversees the water and wastewater collection. So we charge a portion of that. One thing we've noticed during this analysis is the allocation percentage is much higher than you probably expect to be charged to the utility budgets. I've done some benchmarking and some municipalities. I saw a number of 58, 28, 21, 21. So 58% of, say, most of these costs, instead of the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, is seeing another where it's 50% roads, 25% water, 25% wastewater. We currently charge 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So essentially, we seem to be over allocating costs to the water and wastewater program, with combined with everything else is probably another driver of some of those deficits. The problem is, in order to correct that allocation to a more reasonable number, you would have to increase taxes to support some of those levels. One thing that we learned recently too is overtime is also charged in this manner because it's full-time salary. So the overtime that's worked related to any of these positions will also get attributed to this breakdown. So for example, if there's a lot of overtime that's being done on road winter maintenance, snow plowing, and all of that winter work, the majority of that overtime will be charged to the water and sewer budgets and not the winter maintenance budget, which you would probably expect. So this means that we're understating our winter maintenance costs and then also overstating our water and sewer costs. One thing, the last thing here is overhead allocations for indirect costs. So prior to the 2025 budget, we didn't have a methodology to allocate overhead costs. So these are not those salary allocations. These are things like payroll costs, finance costs, clerks costs, council costs, just to like a proportion of that gets charged. There's more work to be done corporately to ensure the accuracy of all the overhead allocations. There's a number of divisions, self-funded divisions, such as the building and the development services, as well as this. So there's more work to be done in 2026 to come up with a consistent methodology to agree on those overhead allocation. Another item that we're looking at for our chart of accounts is a lot of those revenues gets recorded into the corporate services budget, which can also skew the corporate services costing and those department costing, because all of that revenue gets put in the corporate services. So part of that also relates to, say, finance department or other departments. And though that revenue isn't being recorded into those departments, so that needs to be done. So that also makes that benchmarking analysis and efficiency reviews more difficult because it's hard to know where the costs actually are. So there's more work to be done there. On the reserve charge, again, the capital budget's already been approved, so there's not really much to talk about here. The reserves are funded from a fixed charge. Again, that $26, it hadn't changed in 15 years, so we're playing a little bit of catch up to make sure that's kind of being right-sized. I think we're on the right track for that. One of the things, because of all of the different factors in here, there's been limited funds available for, say, meter replacements. So water meters need to be replaced, and we've been collecting money to replace those meters, but there isn't a bucket of money to do all those meter replacements because we need to fund the existing capital program and the operating deficits. So we had to do this. So we also have a practice to charge the water and sewer budgets for reconstructions, road reconstructions. This isn't a standard practice in the industry. It's just another practice that we've done. So we've kind of offset some of the road costs against the water and sewer budgets. This helps again with our funding on our tax-supported capital program, but it doesn't really help our water and sewer capital reserves. It's another contribution to those low reserve balances in the water and sewer budget. But that will hopefully be reviewed in future capital planning when we have a 10-year capital plan. And then our DC reserves for water and sewer, they're both in significant deficits. I believe it's around 4 million. Any future projects would require significant debt, so we would have to fund those through debt. And the legislation could affect our ability to recoup any future debt costs. Legislation keeps changing on the development charge side. On the operating side, again, we talked a little bit about, we added operating contingencies in 2025. I think it was a very strong decision where we transferred an amount specifically to cover operating contingencies. Because of all those deficits, we had to draw from those capital reserves, which depleted our capital reserves. But now we're adding a base of 360,000 for water and 180,000 for wastewater. And last year we added another 100,000 each. So essentially we're contributing $460,000 a year to a water operating contingency reserve and 280,000 to a wastewater operating contingency reserve. Part of the problem is really those numbers should be flipped because the bigger issue is in wastewater. But we are working towards that. So we'll eventually build to a sustainable target. And hopefully, I'm thinking if we stay on track with the water, we could pause that contribution to the water reserve because we'll probably be getting close to that target on the water contingency, especially if we have surpluses. So in 2026, one of on our work plan is to develop a reserve and reserve fund policy with reserve targets. So we'll be reporting back to council to say what those reserve targets should be and how long we think we're away from those operating contingency reserve targets. Ideally, say we would have $1 million in each of those reserves to cover operating contingencies. So then we don't have to touch the capital program if we do experience deficits. And we would also hope that we wouldn't have such large deficits in the future with some of the work that we've been doing. I talked already about the pumping station, but this is the biggest driver really of the wastewater costs. That's really driving most of the costs on the wastewater side. There is an increase in the other costs, the regional costs and the staffing costs, but most of it's related to the increase in the regional cost. Because Breslau is a growing area, that's now that's being charged to more and more residents, so that's costs related to the Kitchener pumping station. One thing, again, this may be better to talk about in more depth in the regular reporting, but as part of this budget review process, we tried to get better consumption data because as part of that reporting, you can remember the actual calculation is you take the total cost that we just went through and then divide it by the consumption number. So that having an accurate consumption number is really accurate. We ran into a few issues and some of these are already known issues. Some of them we've discovered, but Census Analytics, just for council's awareness, that's our water meter reading program. So that's the radios that we put on our water meters. So that data comes directly from the water meter, and that's the meter consumption data. So you can run a report on those water meters. The problem is a lot of the meters don't send signals or send information for whatever reason they're in any given month. So if you run the report, that report tends to understate your consumption because they haven't transmitted the data yet. The good don't get the data is we estimate based on historical usage, and Teresa's team essentially estimates the data for that, and we still send out a bill, but it's an estimated bill because we don't have the estimated usage. But part of the problem then is you can't necessarily use Census Analytics for meter consumption data. So the other option then is we can use billing data that I just referred to. So how much did we bill? So you could say, well, we billed X dollars in revenue, and you can just divide that by our rate and use that for consumption. Part of the problem there is because that assist report finance system is so old, we can't configure the report accurately. And it doesn't include a number of adjustments. And so the report scripts that we actually run to run those reports are inaccurate, and we don't have a good way to actually change that because that software is so old. So the reports that we get out of Assist are inaccurate as well. So what we've been able to do though is go on the back end, and this seems very convoluted, but we have to use SQL scripts on the back end data, and this requires IT support to run scripts on the actual databases themselves to pull tables to get consumption data. So that's the only way really to get accurate consumption data right now, which is part of the problem of reconciling between the systems that was previously identified. But hopefully the new system will improve this reconciliation, that will have a better system that we can configure some of this reports. But that's one of the challenges that we have right now, that we have to go into that back end data to get accurate consumption reporting. And we're doing that, and we'll be presenting that as part of the final budget. Quickly, I just want to talk about meter replacements. One of the things we've identified too is that we're well behind many years behind on meter replacements. As the infrastructure services team has mentioned many times, meters don't slow down or meters don't speed up, they always slow down. So if anything, we're well underestimating our revenue related to water meters. So just going back, we went back 7 years and we haven't necessarily replaced many of our meters. The actuals in there is more related to the census analytics work. So at least 30%, I think the last estimate I saw was our meters are past our useful life, which is 20 years or so. It could be much higher because if it's been quite a year, it could be 50% of our meters could be underestimating our revenue, which means we could potentially be generating much more revenue than we're actually showing here. Because if our meters were replaced accurately, I expect hopefully that our meters will increase, which will also be able to stabilize our rates, which will help. Right now, we put $350,000 in the 2026 capital program to help address that backlog, but it's going to be at least 5 years before we get to a lot of those backlogs in there. And I think this is the last one here. Thanks for bearing with me here. As part of our water license requirements, we need a 6-year financial plan in order to renew our water license. So this really just demonstrates the importance of financial solvency in our water system. So if we have huge deficits and we're not solvent in our water system, it could impact our water license. The BMA study that we showed last year, it had a 5-year plan or maybe a 6-year plan, but essentially we need to add another year to that to the 6-year plan in order to renew our water license. So we're going to be working on that kind of in the background and hopefully incorporate some of this. So that'll also be coming to council in the next month or so, because I believe it's coming in March. But some of those BMA studies didn't account for some of these deficit things that we just identified here and some of those more recent issues. So we'll still need to do more of those work to make sure that we have that 6-year financial plan. And some of the audit findings from that water license review indicated a concern with our current approach of pausing our capital program. So we paused a lot of the renewal work that we had to do in the water and sewer work, and the audit report for our water license identified that pause in there because there's work that we have to do. It's not affecting our water license, but it's just we need to then, we put a pause, we need to really start to catch up on a lot of our capital backlog that was identified there. And part of that, that 6-year plan that BMA did, this was one of the inputs. So this was based on our 10-year capital plan. So one thing that we're proposing to do is have a proper 10-year capital plan. One thing that jumped out to me, I had to go back in and actually look at our BMA report again to make sure those numbers were accurate, those kind of parameters. But in their model, they included $50 million for water and wastewater work in our capital budget in 2026. Council will recall we just passed our capital budget. There wasn't $50 million in our budget. But that means that those parameters were also skewed, whatever those rates over the 6-year plan, because whatever the new plan is, it's not going to look like this. But this also stresses the importance of the 10-year capital plan because there's so many dependencies of that 10-year capital plan. The BMA report used that capital plan and the data in it accurate because just a year ago, we said we would do a lot more water and sewer work than we actually included. So they included significant debt, which had to be repaid as part of that rate study. So that 7 and 11% that we looked at included much higher capital spending than we're actually planning on doing. So this is kind of the, the conclusion here. So what we're proposing, because there are a lot of uncertainty and a lot of things that could be changed that will impact the proposed rates, everything from the capital plan, the cost allocations, the meter reads. We don't want to necessarily overshoot the mark, but we don't want to keep anything too low that we have to play a lot of catch up. So we're proposing, and again, this is just for discussion. It's going to be in the mayor's budget and it's up to the mayor for discussion, but I know council would want to see, well, what are the rates? Give us a ballpark. So we're proposing around 5% for water, which includes the region. So we're proposing 4% increase for us and then roughly 6% for the region. 5% for water. And on the wastewater side, we know we have a bigger issue on the wastewater side and more work to be done there. So we're proposing an 8% increase for the township portion, combined with the regional portion of 6%, 5.9%, gives us roughly 7% there. So 5% for the water, 7% for the wastewater. I think it's a responsible budget, very much in line, lower than the BMA study, but for reasons that we went through there. And it does set us up that we won't have to play too much catch up going forward once we get some of this in there. And it also ensures that if there are a lot of extra revenue, that we don't have to, pause on the rate. So I think it's kind of a reasonable rate. And then again, we do the same thing for, this is just the reserve thing. We're doing the same proportion. We want to make sure that we keep rate. So this is essentially the summary there, 5.7, 5.7 for the volumetric and the fixed for that. Still a lot of additional work to do, and I've gone through all of this in more detail in each slide, but there's a lot of work that still need to be done to make sure we have a accurate, costed out financial plan. My plan for future budgets is to have a lot of this sorted out and to give council kind of a 4 or 5 year plan of this is where we could see our rates going. And so there's more stability and more certainty related to those rates. So that's essentially all I had, and open to any questions.
Questions, words of wisdom, guidance? What you got? Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks, Mayor. Through you to Director Lynn. Meter replacements, you say 30% are past their useful life. Glad that we're addressing it with the, $350,000. Could we increase that though, or is there a limitation to what industry would be able to commit to us?
I'll defer that to one of the team from the infrastructure side. The only caveat with that, and really it's not going to matter one way or another, is we've already set our capital budget and it was in the capital budget that council's already approved. There could be something in here that we could just add to it. Because it is still funded through water and wastewater rates, it doesn't really affect the tax rate at all. But that's just the only item. But the actual volume, I'd just defer to IS team to see what's feasible.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councilor Cadeau. That's precisely it. So we're getting into a multi-year, really in perpetuity replacement program, and we're just starting right now. So that was part of this for sure, was to look at what's a reasonable number, and then just keep that going year over year until, and probably never end that program. You're going to always be in that cycle of replacement. This is dipping our toe in the water though. But I think 500, yeah, that we had felt that we could put in this year's budget, and you'll see that year over year.
Councillor Schwint.
Just curious your projections for 2025 deficit or surplus for each, and will that include any adjustments that we may talk about in closed?
So that's why I didn't, through you, Mayor Shantz, that's why I didn't include kind of the 2025 projections, because there's a lot of uncertainty related to those. So we did bill for a lot of some of these catch-up billings, but then some of the collectability is potentially in question. So we're not really sure what the exact number would be. So I would project that we could, again, we could probably have a small surplus in water, but likely we're still running deficits in wastewater, but not to the same extent as we have been in previously. The catch-up billing will help, but again, no matter what the number is, that's one-time revenue. So there is still an underlying deficit there in the wastewater program.
And this one, I guess, is for you, Mayor Shantz. The regions obviously set their budget, but things have changed. So you're anticipating a mid-year adjustment in water in the region, and should the township be looking at its impact and setting our budget as well?
We haven't had any discussions at the region about increasing the rates this year. I guess I wouldn't say it's impossible, because we still have a lot of information to collect and a lot of, analysis to do So the short answer is I don't know. Councillor Cadeau.
Ms. Mayor, two questions for Director Lynn. Slide 5, current rates for 2025. It has the flat rate. The first question, is that annual? I imagine it's annual, not monthly. And the second question would be, how do we compare to some of our comparators with that flat rate? You had mentioned we haven't really upped it in 15 years until recently when we've indexed it. I'm just wondering if that's the appropriate number that we should be proceeding with from here on out.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I was just pulling up the slide deck again. This might help.
Through Mayor Shantz, I can answer the reserve. So the current rate of 27.64 is per billing period. So you would multiply that times 6 for a year, because we do 6 billings per year. In comparison, it's probably all over. We have no data that we've actually ever compared fixed rates. Certainly something we can look into. I know I'm in Mapleton and it's a lot lower there. This is a lot lower, but I can't say for sure.
And maybe I can help with that. So we can probably do a little bit more analysis. So what I was doing is I pulled out a slide because I probably should have pulled out a few more because it was a long presentation. Thank you for your patience. But one of the ones I had actually two items for comparison here. So this is the one just using the absolute rate, as this takes in like the 372 and the 277. So that's essentially where we get this rate. The one I didn't show here, which is to your question, Councillor Cadeau, this is a little bit more complicated, but it's another comparison. You can see it includes, spelling's wrong there, but North Dumfries and Wellesley, because that's also run by the region. So it's a little bit more comparator in our region, but this is the household average. So this takes into consumption purposes as well as that fixed rate. So the other one is just an absolute rate on the volume. This one is kind of the household burden, and it's run by BMA, and it basically accounts for part of the fixed rate, part of the consumption rate, but also part of the usage there, which is probably part of the reason why Kitchener's low on this one and high there, because they have probably potentially more water users. But it maybe gives a better answer to your question. We still rank pretty high when all things are taken into account compared to some of the other comparators. Again, not as high as some other ones. These are run by the region, which would be interesting. But this takes into account probably, it does take into account those fixed costs as well. It's basically what the average resident would pay for a water bill, and it's around $1,200 versus some of these other ones for that.
Other questions? Thoughts? Words of wisdom for Colm and me? Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. For Colm, he mentioned the roads being funded out of waters and sewers. Can he elaborate? I may have missed something when he was talking about that.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, sorry, I took a drink here. So there's two components of this, and I'll start, and maybe Director Puopolo can take over if I miss something. But the first is on the operating side. So you probably caught all those allocations. So we're probably over allocating for some of those indirect costs for some of the staff in the infrastructure team, but a lot of that work is related to roads. So say for overtime costs, for example, on the roads, that would be charged 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, like 1/3 to roads, but 2/3 would go to water and wastewater. Ideally, we would be able to identify what the actual overtime was used for example, and we could charge that to like a road repair or a water main break or a sewer lining or something like that. So that's one way that happens. I think the other way, which I think is closer to your question, is relates to the capital program, where some of our reconstructions, instead of just funding them completely from our infrastructure levy, which is the primary source of our road reserve, we charge a portion of that to the water and sewer reserve as well for road work. This is kind of a practice that's been happening for quite a while, but which saves us maybe on the infrastructure levy side, but it also depletes our tax supported side. And maybe I'll just pass it over to Jared to explain that process a little bit more.
Yeah, through Mayor Shantz to Councillor Bryant. So I think on the reconstruction side of things, water and sewer rates are appropriate to be applied to replacement of that infrastructure, that specific infrastructure. The challenge that Woolwich has had is we have not been able to provide enough levy dollars to support all of the levy replacements associated with the reconstruction. So you have water, sewer, storm sewer, the road system with pavement, curb, gutter, sidewalk, that sort of thing. So typically, water and sewer has taken a big brunt of the reconstructions over the last 12, 13 years. And then we've been leveraging OCIF or Fed gas tax and then supplementing the difference with either new levy or infrastructure reserve. That's been a challenge, we'll say, in Woolwich. And then we're noticing that obviously with the reserves being depleted the way they have been. And appreciating there's been a lot of development driving a lot of those reconstruction projects too. So they haven't necessarily been all related to the appropriate life cycle of the pieces of infrastructure. Development needs an upsized water main. DCs obviously pick up some of that, but there is some, existing benefit dollars that are being funded there from the reserve. So I think that's one piece of that. The other piece of that is that we do require water and wastewater operators to plow in the wintertime. We've not been able to create a roads department that is fully sufficient to deal with all the roads related operating and maintenance costs. So it's just inherently a challenge. And then that's exactly what happens is there is water and sewer being obviously applied to those operators that are performing roads duties essentially. So that's some of the challenges that Woolwich has faced.
Okay, so that may be why our reserves are showing as low as they are, is because of the way we're allocating funds. Is that correct, or?
Yes, I see nods from.
I'll just answer. Sorry, that is correct. That is definitely a factor into why. I mean, I would say it's a perfect storm. It's what we just talked about, which is driving the capital dollars are going to be lower than they could be. But we talked a little bit about meter replacement, so that's which we fixed the service charge at $26 for a long time. So that's not generating as much revenue as we would have liked. And then we had those deficits, unfortunately, on the operating side. We didn't have the contingency. So that was also bringing down the reserve. So all of this was contributing to those low reserve balances that we're seeing now. They're all playing a part in that. The one that we just talked about, the only solution there, unfortunately, is to add money into the infrastructure levy or to the other reserves to fund those appropriately, because we've been using this as a funding source. So to correct it, essentially, the cost still needs to be accounted for. So we need to increase taxes to pay for it if we're not using water and sewer.
So essentially, we're robbing Peter to pay Paul is what it comes down to again. Okay, thank you.
So that's kind of what we're starting to address with this budget, and that Colm and his team are going to be working at in the next several months to at least give us the information we need and a path forward to sort of put things in places that are more meaningful for managerial decision making. Councillor Schwint.
Thanks. Just my thoughts going forward. I'm hearing Colm talk about we need to do a better job of allocating costs, and I do respect that. But we also know we've got a billing issue, we've got I&I issues, and lots of different things in the water department, and only so much time and resources. My preference would be spend more time on the outward facing issues like the billing, the water meters, and doing a better job of operating, because that brings in revenue to the township. Which pocket pays for it? Well, it's important. It's less important that the money comes in. So if we're crunched for time, my bias is shift away from internal allocations and to external facing things.
Thanks. Mr. Lynn, does that fit with your plans, or did you want to comment on that at all, or?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, I think the philosophy makes sense. I mean, the logic makes sense, like to generate the revenue rather than just allocate the cost between different departments. The challenge is it's not just that we know exactly where to get the revenue. It's not as simple as that. I think there's more work to be done on the reconciliation side, for example. I wish it was just more time and we could just identify more users to go after. There's only so much, I think, I hate to say it, to grade my profession, but there's only so much work you can do behind a desk. From an accounting perspective, a lot of it has to be done out in the field, like meter replacements and I&I works. So from a finance lens, like a lot of the work that we can do to support this would be the reconciliation, but also the analysis, where it's the IS team also that would be partners in this to do a lot of the field work to get some of those that work that I think you're mentioning done. So I don't think we can task accountants to fix I&I issues, for example, but I think you understand that.
I know on that. So does this budget and this plan in conjunction with our regular budget, does that maximize? And I know you could always you say, well, we can go all out and do everything, but like maximize in a responsible way are things like updaters and the other things that Councillor Schwint was addressing.
Yes, through you, Mayor Shantz. Yes, and if I could, I can maybe come back at the next meeting just to kind of lay out maybe some other ideas that we would have, more concrete kind of examples of that to maybe help answer Councillor Schwint's questions of other work that we could be doing, because we can put our minds to it as well.
Councillor Schwint.
I guess, yeah, when the fulsome budget comes forward the next meeting or two, I think it'd be appropriate at the same time having our next benchmarking report. We had one November, that's been 2-3 months by February. And to pass the budget, I'd really like to know, hey, where are we at right now and what measurable improvements have we seen quarter by quarter or period by period?
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cadeau.
Thanks. On slide 24, I really appreciate the attention that you've paid to additional work that needs to be done. Without putting you on the spot, I'm probably putting you on the spot by asking you this, but is this a 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 10-year plan? Like, what could we expect to see with regards to the additional work that needs to be done?
Through you, Mayor Shantz, to Councillor Cadeau, that's a good question. I wouldn't say it's a 1-year plan. I would say part of the challenge is going to be developing a 10-year capital plan. Again, like that's the basis for a lot of the studies that external consultants are relying on. So that could take at least a year, if not more, just to do that. In parallel, we're implementing our new system. I think that's going to bear a lot of fruit, but we have to configure that. So that could be kind of next year for some of these. Some of these open type things can also be done, as well as we're always finding new revenue sources that Councillor Schwint referred to. But I would say realistically, to get us to a place where I would be comfortable, it's at least 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, the budget needs to be published by February 1st, is that correct? So.
Through you, Mayor Shantz, that is correct.
So we'll be getting that out this week then. And then February 10th will be your opportunity to make changes to it. Okay, if there's nothing else on budget, I'll move on to bylaws. Can I have a mover and a seconder to pass the bylaws? Councillor Cadeau, Councillor Grant, all those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Is that okay that I didn't read confirmed first and second, third time? Okay. That brings us to the end of our meeting. Oh, that's right. Okay, so we did not finish all of our closed session matters, and we need to reconvene in closed session to discuss the 22 Church Street land sale matter. Can I have a motion to move into closed? Moved by Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Burgess. All those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And do we want to do the adjournment now as well then?
Yes, that would essentially adjourn us. Yeah.
So do we need a motion to adjourn as well? No. All right, our next regular session is February 10th, 2026. And we'll see y'all in closed.